Hello and welcome to the deepest dive from MinnMax, the best, most thorough discussion about Cyberpunk 2077 on the internet. I am Ben Hansen, like it or not, and I'm joined by Jeff Marchiafava.
Like it.
Leo Vader.
Not.
And Sergio Vasquez.
This whole situation's bent over, cheeks spread wide.
All right, we're here, everybody.
Wow.
This is Cyberpunk 2077, the grand finale of the deepest dive, our huge multi-part game club discussion. If you're just tuning in now, thank you, but you can go back and find the other parts. Also, special shout out to the people from the future, because I bet people will be checking this out once it launches, hopefully in a better state on next-gen consoles. Do you think there's going to be a second bump? Will that second wave come?
I hope so.
I think
Big time.
I hope they do too. We can get into some comments later on from people that feel the same way, but thank you to everybody that's joined us on this journey. We have a bunch of comments that people submitted at patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's. If you support us at any tier, you can submit a comment for the deepest dive, and you can also unlock the podcast version of the deepest dive, max spoilers, our interviews, early access to the MinnMax show, early access to Leo Vader's Watch Later, a ton of stuff. If you just check out patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's, we'd appreciate the support. And if you like this game club format, it's a nice way to keep it rolling. Because if you support us, then you unlock the RSS feed, which you then put into whatever podcast player you like, whatever app, and then it's just filled with bonuses, including...
Or just read the raw data, Cyberpunk style.
Yeah, come on, everybody. What are you, cowards? You played this game for a reason. Now start reading data. This discussion is all about the ending of Cyberpunk 2077. Act 3 / the ending / epilogue / everything and anything else we have missed along the way. We have all wrapped it up. We have collected a bunch of comments from people on Patreon. What do you all think is the most common comment submitted on Patreon from people playing along with us for Act 3? Leo, you look like you're thinking hard.
Yeah, and that's how you know I have a good answer ready.
Yeah.
I mean, you said earlier before we were recording a lot of people talking about their endings. That's what I feel like would be the biggest one is here's what happened with my ending.
I didn't even count that because that was so obvious. And yes, that is what everybody was saying. But they all said different things. That's kind of an embarrassingly stupid guess. Jeffem, do you have a real logical guess?
Yeah. It's going to be about...
He's looking around the room.
It's Adam Smasher stomping Saul's head in.
Okay, interesting. Sergio Vasquez, most common comment?
I looked up a way to save my friend and it didn't happen. Is there a way to save this person?
Ooh, so they're treating the Patreon comment section like an FAQ?
As a Google, yeah.
No.
Murrah situation here.
This is tough. This is closer basically to Leo's guess than I would care to admit, but it's more of a sentiment, which is I think the most common comment would be, I was disappointed in this ending. Whatever ending they got, it seemed like a lot of people were disappointed. A lot of people wrote in just about Johnny taking control on a couple different sections, about Johnny visiting V's grave. And also a lot of people wrote in about how the game crashed during credits, which I have seen so many people talk about. That's fascinating. Did it crash for anybody else during the credits?
No.
Okay.
I've had a lot of problems, but not crashes on PC.
Yeah, same here. All right. We should start before we really dive into the core of Act 3 here, because at the end of the last discussion, a new critical path opened up, and this is the one where you can give control over to Johnny as he tries to take down Adam Smasher and starts working with Rogue and stuff. What do y'all think of that mission? Jeffem, what stood out to you there?
You mean when you go to meet Hanako?
No, before that. I mean, at least it was for me, like before the point of no return. Did you all do this?
I did. It's the one where you're trying to get the band together basically to play another show and you're doing.
Oh, I did that in Act 2. You're
talking about the date with Rogue?
Hang on.
There's multiple Johnny opportunities.
This is really interesting, yeah, because we all have such different paths. So for me, this opened up. It must be maybe if you hit a certain bonding level with Johnny. Because for me, it was at the very end of Act 2. Then it was like, okay, let's go over, talk to Rogue, hand over control. And so then that segued into, then recruiting the band, which is weird because I'm like, oh, this happened earlier for everybody else. So why is it throwing me into this now? But so everybody let Johnny take control a lot earlier then?
I let him take control for the
anything.
side mission where I went on a date with Rogue right at the start of Act 3.
Oh, I didn't go on a date with Rogue. What was that like?
Went to a cute little drive-in movie with a little 10-second loop with some action. Nice little conversation. They almost made love, but they said it wouldn't be fair. And Johnny was like, wouldn't be fair to V because I'm in her body or whatever. And Rogue said, no, wouldn't be fair to you because of subtle hints at how I've changed over the years and how you don't really know who I am at this point.
That's an interesting idea.
And then there was a door on my way out. I could lock and unlock one of the doors, which I'd never seen in the game before. That was just one of the doors of the
Rogue in? Is
drive-in.
that what you're saying?
What?
So you locked Rogue in? Is that what you're saying? On the way out?
No, I realized I could have.
That's so weird. It's like the equivalent of putting the tie on the doors, is you can lock the door and let folks know you're having a good time with Rogue.
I guess, but it's cute. It's like an abandoned drive-in movie theater, and you're just sitting in this car that's the wheels are gone and it's just on blocks.
Oh,
It's a
gotcha.
cute little moment.
Oh, that is cute. Well, then, I mean, I guess going back in time for me when this picked up, it was that tough decision of like, do you trust Johnny? And then your evidence is him taking over V's body here in this mission. And fusing the voices a little bit like, fusing in Dragon Ball where they're both talking at the same time. But this was like the point of no return for my relationship with Johnny. Like the idea of, all right, I'll hand over my body so you can do this very specific thing and track down Adam Smasher and talk to Rogue. And then he ends up just getting way too drunk, getting a frickin' tattoo, getting in a car accident while trying to fool around with a girl. Like at this point, I was like, nope, I am no longer on Johnny's side in any way, especially because I was playing a sober V that entire time. So like it had like an extra weird wrinkle where when Johnny takes control, then it's just slamming back drinks and just getting more and more out of control. And the jump cutting, which I know we talked about in the last discussion, but I still think it's just awesomely used during these sequences with the first person vomiting. It's really interesting.
Oh, yeah, I did do that as well.
But that was before the date with Rogue?
I think it was before. Yeah, I think I just forgot about it.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. And then, so it was a while ago when you all like encountered Grayson and got Johnny's Porsche and all that stuff and his gun?
Correct.
Oh my gosh, it's so weird how this is.
I think it is based on that percentage.
It must be.
Because there's a ending thing that's, I think, partially based on that as well. So I think it is, depending on where you're at with that. But I also didn't get it until Act 3. But overall, I think that's one of the better quests. I think it was weird because I think thematically it fits with my character, who is slowly like, oh, cool, I found Johnny's boots, or like I found Johnny, like this one equipment from Johnny. I think I had his aviators by then. And so that quest slowly like turning me into Johnny. So I didn't feel as weird about letting him take control.
Right. We're basically the same person anyway. Have at it.
Yeah. And I like that one because I had been trying to be Johnny's friend throughout this, even though the game does not really facilitate that much. But so that string of missions, especially when it starts with him trying to go find the band and put everyone back together, felt like a nice kind of send off of like, well, I only have a little bit of time left before I, leave and give you complete control of your body back. And so I'm going to be dead at that point. So like, you're just kind of doing like a make a wish for Johnny Silverhand, and like
right.
He has one last date with Rogue, which didn't go super great, and then he gets to play with his band one more time, and that mission was interesting because he seemed to genuinely care about his friend Carrie during that, and he was really like, this is more for him because of what he's going through, and I just kind of want to help boost him, and there was some interesting character growth for him in those missions. I felt like,
yeah.
I
think it's also based on, I'm pretty sure that he kind of thought of him as kind of a wimp, right? Like he thought of him as a coward, and he does have like this giant pad or whatever that feels like, oh, I guess you just sold out to Arasaka, but I think over the course of that quest, you as Johnny gets to know him, he does kind of earn a little bit more of his respect. So by the end of it, it's like, okay, maybe I was like, obviously there's been quite a number of years, but maybe I was wrong about you. And so I think he kind of does the whole concert thing in part to make it up to him, but also because like, hey, I want to play another venue. I haven't done that in a long time.
Yeah. Now, Leo, you've been in some bands in your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you'd be able to tell whether or not your friend was brought back to life, even if they look like they were another person, just from the way they were playing their instrument, like Gary does with Johnny?
Instantly.
Instantly.
Yeah, in my ending, that also kind of happens. And I said, yeah, I would do that too. Yeah, I noticed also.
Wait.
It's just like how Johnny would have played it.
Does that really happen to get in your ending?
Yeah.
Oh, weird.
Which I wrote down the name of my ending. New Dawn Fades is the one I got.
Oh, okay. We'll get all that stuff in a bit here. There's some thoughts on that Johnny mission, which is called A Cool Metal Fire. Chris Culkins writes in and says, Johnny's personal quest, A Cool Metal Fire, had me feeling conflicted between wanting to experience it and role-playing a V that would not willingly give Johnny control. Needless to say, he burned any remnant of a bridge that was left between us at that point, but I still went along with it because I didn't want to wait to see how it goes in a second playthrough, which I've already started. Shocking for someone playing on a base Xbox One? Yes, Chris, that is a little bit shocking, but I'm glad you're enjoying it that much. Sean Mills submits a comment saying, I love the Cool Metal Fire quest where Johnny takes control of your body. It reminded me of watching Uncut Gems and how uncomfortable and anxious it is to watch someone make a series of constant, selfish, wrong decisions. My favorite part is when he goes to the tattoo parlor and you get the choice of a goat head tattoo or the other one. I picked the other one and woke up with a Johnny plus V forever tattoo. Thanks, Johnny. I always knew you actually cared. That's beautiful. Okay, well, let's actually get to the real stuff here then. The real deal. Oh, yeah.
Real quick, did anyone else do the Lizzie Wizzy quest? I think that might have been a Act 3 thing, but that's when it popped up for me. I don't know if it popped up for anybody else in Act 3 or if it was an Act 2 thing.
No, which one's that?
So you encounter a digital pop star who is like, I think she was an actual person, but I think her AI got uploaded into an AI. So it's like she's basically a robot at this point. And this is the character voiced by Grimes.
Oh, yeah.
And so you do an entire quest for her about like, her manager's basically trying to like change her AI to get her to cooperate, but she thinks he's cheating on her because they're dating. And so you're like, oh, go see if he's cheating on me. But then you go to like you investigate and you realize that he's trying to change her AI to make her more cooperative, basically, to like whatever, all of his requests to make her more famous. And that quest can go a couple of ways, but I thought it was pretty interesting. I think Grimes does a pretty good job in terms of voice acting. She might have, I mean, obviously she has experience with like the subject matter of being a pop star. But that was one of those weird, like, oh, I'm surprised they're kind of using her this way. This is what I felt like Johnny's involvement was going to be. It's like, okay, here's one quest line's worth of dialogue. It's pretty interesting. You can she's pretty distinct as a voice actress, but I thought that quest was interesting, but it felt really weird thrown in at the end, which is why I thought it might have been something that I just didn't unlock until that point.
Yeah, it did pop up for me, I think, because it started out in some sort of anonymous thing. I forget, like, there was some prompt, but it didn't tell you exactly what the mission was going to be in some way. But Hugo in the Backstage Pass chat, he says that Lizzie ends up murdering her manager depending on your choices. There.
Yeah, which is what ended up happening. I think I ended up doing it because I think she asked me to. I don't remember exactly how it goes. But I thought that one was kind of interesting. And there was one other quest where killing in the name, which is a thing where you're trying to go around the city to hack different terminals. And I think it turns out that this thing has been like broadcasting these like cult-like messages that have been getting people to kind of like agitated. And then you realize it's been like a random fortune-telling machine that was broken. And so and it had been broadcasting those signals like erroneously, or someone had hacked it. And that to me felt like the most Witcher-like quest.
Oh, yeah.
One of the most Witcher-like quests, in that it's like, oh, it might be this thing where you encounter a cult or whatever, and then you have to break into their lair. But it's like, oh, it's just like this weird kind of accident of this world that people misunderstood.
Right.
And I thought that one was pretty fun. But I don't know if those are like Act 2 quests or Act 3 quests, because things got pretty confused by them.
Yeah. Also in that same vein, I had a mission that tied into my Corpo class role, whatever you want to call it. But it opened up around this area too. It was called War Pigs. Like, did everybody have like a class specific mission towards this ending here?
Maybe, but because I definitely don't remember a quest called War Pigs.
Okay. Yeah. So for me, I was expecting much more, but it's just like, Corpo spoilers, everybody, but very light. But it's just like another guy who's kicked out of Arasaka named Frank, and he wants to impress Abernathy, who you were trying to take out in the very beginning. Jenkins hired V to kill Abernathy. So it's just this weird thing where Frank is arguing with you, and then you shoot Frank, and that's the end of the quest. I was expecting something bigger to have that tie in the ending in some way, but it's just a very simple thing. But the kind of cool thing is that in this mission, Johnny really for the first time that I can think of on the Corpo path, like starts giving you crap. It seems like since you worked for Arasaka from the Corpo path, Johnny should really be drilling in on that. Like, what the hell's wrong with you? I can't believe you actually worked for them. And that seems to all be contained in this quest where Johnny actually addresses that idea a little bit more than the rest of the game.
Yeah, I wonder if that is them kind of limiting the scope of responses, because that's something I'm not getting. I'm not getting a lot from the game. Is okay, this quest that you did at one point impacts this other thing, or at least maybe they're being more subtle about how, like, oh, this thing triggers, but you don't know that the reason why.
Yeah.
But that seems to be like, okay, well, instead of having a thing where your choices come up in all these different permutations, which it looks like they saved for the ending, they just have like, okay, if you pick this is like the direct result of this choice, and it's kind of self-contained here. So I'm guessing there is like a nomad quest that I didn't register as a nomad quest, but there's like that one, and then maybe there's a Corpo and there's a Street Kid one.
Yeah.
That is interesting how much, like, I didn't expect the choices I was making at the end to actually matter as much as they did, because they hadn't for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
But it was like, oh, these are like 4 different missions you can end up doing.
Yeah.
For the 4 endings.
Totally. And I'm curious to talk more about what everybody else experienced, but I went through it and the entire time I was thinking like, okay, this is probably shared. This is probably shared. And then it's interesting because reading everybody else's ending seems like a lot of people are kind of, the light sentiment would be, I'd say, yeah, vaguely disappointed by the ending here, which is understandable. But then at the same time, it's like, oh, it's more impressive than I think, just for the range of options here. They're packing more in at the end than I expected. So maybe this conversation will change some people's minds just to show them the extent that your choices, well, it's a little bit of that Mass Effect 3 conundrum, isn't it? Of how much do your choices matter versus how much do just these specific choices at the very end matter?
It's also a weird thing, because I think as I've gotten older, I've role played less and kind of try to make the most coherent story out of what I'm doing, which is not to say like, oh, I'm a nice person. I'm a nice person. I always think about, okay, well, thematically, what would be most appropriate here?
Yeah.
And I think there's maybe 1 or 2 endings that I think are the most thematically appropriate. But I think if I were to make my own ending, I would pick and choose a lot of different elements, because there's things that are like, I don't know if I like this part, how it tied into my character or the story of the game. So I don't think there's any one ending that I'm like, okay, that's the ending you should definitely get.
Right.
Which is kind of interesting, because like most games have like well, you can do A or B, but C, if you do this other thing, is secretly the best one.
Yes.
Grand Theft Auto 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, just to put a button on that, Hugo in the Backstage Pass chat, by the way, is an expert. He says the quest with Alana Pierce is the Nomad exclusive one called These Boots Are Made for Walking. So apparently that's the one.
Right, that one has to do with
up.
your ride, because you go and get your old car that you had at the beginning of the game and you don't have I think after the intro. And she, I think, has it at a junkyard.
Okay.
And you're like, that's my car. And you just have like one conversation with her, and then you can just buy it off her. Or I didn't do the other thing, so I just bought it off her. It's like, okay, cool, the car's yours now. And then you get your old car, which isn't good. So I immediately switched back to my motorcycle.
Yeah. How's her acting, by the way?
She didn't have that many lines, so it's kind of hard to gauge. But
okay.
I think she did all right.
And she has the Australian accent?
I believe she does, yeah.
Okay, that's cool. Okay, so you go to meet Hanako. You go up into Arasaka Tower. I assume we're all on the same path at this point, where she talks about like, oh yeah, the full board knew about the death of my father, but we need you to testify that this happened, that you witnessed it, and that it was my brother that actually killed him. And then with that, we will get the construct out of your head. Yes, everybody had that same basic idea.
That's the basic offer she makes to you.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember when it was, but there's some moment in this discussion, might be in the elevator where you're arguing with Johnny, where we have like 3 different dialogue options, and it just says, I am dead. Does anybody else remember that?
I think, yeah, and I think that's one where you start with I, and then it slowly starts adding the other options, right?
Yeah, I really enjoy this. So strange. But I like that, like in that discussion, you know, they're talking about different options and talk about, oh, we can call in the Aldecados. And Johnny's like, oh, those trailer tuggers. He's like, I don't want them messing around with this. So I think it's just running down the different options you have for this final mission. But you go in, go back, talk to Victor. Then you talk to Misty. She brings you up on the roof in a spot that she said she used to hang out with Jackie quite a bit. And they talk about Jackie, which is nice to have that callback there of just her talking a little bit more about their relationship.
Yeah, and for anyone who hasn't gotten the ending, right before you sit down, that's where you want to save if you're like me and end up doing all the endings.
Oh, you did all of them?
I did all of them except for the one that I couldn't do, which was the secret one.
Okay. Oh, that's fascinating. Okay, I definitely want to unpack that. Yeah, but it's gated long before this. They're like, have your save here, everybody, because it's not letting you explore the open world anymore. It's actually jumping you between these locations. But then Johnny comes out, and this is when you actually have to make the choices about what are you going to do. Are you going to agree to Haneko's terms and try and get the construct out? Are you going to storm the tower? My options were just to call Pan Am, but I assume that if you are closer with Judy and Rogue, that those options are also in there.
So Judy was my love interest, she's the one I went to, and she's not an option, which I guess kind of makes sense because like she doesn't really have like the reason you can go with Pan Am is because she has the Aldecados,
right?
Versus Judy, who doesn't really have the dolls by the end of the game, because that goes pretty sideways. And then you can call in Rogue, who has some personal stakes and is also like a fixer. So she has like, it makes sense for you to go with Pan Am or Rogue. And those were my choices, were to agree to Haneko's thing, go with Rogue or go with Pan Am. Those are like the three that it initially presents you.
Right.
Those are the mission options, but he also tells you to call your love interest just to talk to. If you have one at that point. Yes.
Which I wish you could call people besides your romantic interest, because I didn't have a romantic interest, but I was still like, I had friends. Oh, like
don't matter.
Pan Am or Victor.
Could have called Mama Wells again.
Yeah.
You actually get
I'm about to die too.
For the ending I got, you got a couple opportunities actually to call your friends and try and check in on everybody. But Jeff, I'm curious, what path did you choose?
Well, it was interesting because I ended up playing through it twice because I chose the Johnny Rogue one, and that ending sucked so much that I went back through and this it. I'm interested to hear more of your take, Cyril, because I did after playing the Johnny Rogue one and then the Pan Am one, I do feel like the Pan Am one is the quote unquote right one, and the Johnny Rogue one just blew ass. Like everything about that one ended up being so negative, and I think part of that was my own confusion as I was playing through it, which we'll get to, but the tone difference between those two, especially if you had Judy as your romantic interest, like the tone difference is completely different.
Yeah, I do think that like you're right in that there are completely different endings that look at the game in very different ways. But I think I didn't love the Rogue ending, but I also, that was the only time I ever role played because I thought like, I don't want to get Pan Am involved in this. I like her too much.
Right.
You know, like, even though it made sense, right? Like obviously wouldn't want to get Judy involved, but like the idea of like, when you choose the Aldecados, they're like, well, we have basically a tank. There's something to get out of this, and that we can get a bunch of Arasaka resources. But it felt like it like the right favorite call. So I went with Rogue because I feel like she had more stakes in that conflict of, well, we tried this once and it didn't go, so let's try it again with Johnny and like this new plan now that I'm a fixer and have like all this weaponry. And I think that to me feels like maybe the one that fits the storyline, but I will say that it doesn't, I don't think the ending is good, but I think it fits the story better.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's exactly why I chose that one too, because it was like, well, okay, Johnny has this unfinished business with Arasaka and with Atom Smasher. You know you're going to run into Atom Smasher. Rogue does too. They've done this before. It seemed to make sense. And again, I guess a lot of it for me was hinging on that conversation that I had with Johnny, where he was like, hey, I'm going to get you through this. When it comes time, you know, like I'm going to break in there, I'm going to solve this, and then I'm going to give you your body back. And so that was kind of what led me to be like, okay, yeah, I'm going to trust you. But the outcomes of those two are just so night and day that.
Yeah.
Well, here, Patrick,
I was really surprised, and I thought like, Jesus, like if I had just played that one, and that was like my complete experience with the ending of that would have really soured me more than I was expecting.
Yeah, that sucks that it feels like emotionally that's the one you should pick. But yeah, Patrick Henderson's with you. He says, I picked the ending to storm Arasaka Tower with Rogue, and the setup was great, and it seemed like it was going to be a big payoff. The mission was short and pretty anticlimactic, and multiple glitches required reloading. Rogue dies pretty abruptly. The Atom Smasher boss fight was essentially a joke, and then V became the queen of the afterlife, but I got to see none of how that came about. I love most of this game, but man, it ended with a thud. And then Spencer Boutine comments on that, carrying on that theme, and says, V awakens in a very bougie apartment with Judy, now replacing Rogue as the owner and fixer of Afterlife. Judy still leaves Night City, as was her original intention, and V pulls off an epic space heist on an orbiting casino as a final send-off? What? Did you see that?
Yeah.
So and that sucks? That sounds cool.
Yeah, so that one was weird because I think that one is the one that I kind of actually liked thematically, because it feels like everything you've been doing in that game has always, because it is like this very set thing, it feels like a transactional relationship with everybody. Like you have like, okay, do this for me and I'll do this for you because this is the thing that is most beneficial to both of us. And I like that because I don't know how much we want to get into it now, but like the ending is like either you can give Johnny your body and he basically gets to live out a normal life, or you continue to have your body, but you don't get to live that long.
Yeah.
And I like choosing that ending thematically because it feels like the one thing where they're like, we're really going to give it to everybody by not making this like the most transactional thing, because it doesn't make sense in the sense of like, well, Johnny would have a much longer life, right? But you're like, no, I don't care whether or not this benefits anybody. This is the thing that I'm going to do.
Right.
So I liked it on that end, but it did feel a lot of like, okay, that's cool. Like that's maybe where it, like I like it, but then the like, okay, now I'm a fixer. I get to do whatever I want, and also we're gonna have this giant like space station heist. Feels like I don't know that this needed to be here, but okay.
Do you get to play the heist?
No. It is. Oh. This is like the third person thing that the game always cuts to in every ending.
Yeah.
Where they're just like, we're gonna show you your V, but yeah, it's also. It did feel really abrupt, and like I don't know why I needed to see this. I think the final choice of you making like the choice to enter your body regardless of whatever, I think that's kind of like the denouement, and then the rest of it is just like, okay, cool. Here's my love interest. Here's the results of everything.
Right.
Cool. Then like the extra layer of like, oh, by the way, we're gonna do this totally kicking space heist because like you're gonna die anyway at some point. So
I'm fascinated by the idea that Atom Smasher kills Rogue.
So yeah.
Yeah, and so like that mission was pretty interesting to me. It brought back kind of Final Fantasy remake vibes of like breaking into Shinra at the end, of like, because it's this massive, corporate tower that you're kind of going down several levels, and there are different guys. It isn't super difficult or anything, but you basically get to the point where you're going to open up the gate, and where, Atom Smasher pops out like Jaws. But he grabs Rogue and he basically punches through her chest, and then she takes out a grenade and like, clips it on him or whatever.
Clips it.
And he calls her the C word again because that's kind of his thing.
Uh-huh.
And then, and she dies, and the grenade does like a little damage, but that basically is how it punches you into that boss fight against Atom Smasher, which for me also was just like a matter of figuring out which good weapon I had in my inventory at that point, and then it did not take a lot. It was.
I don't know what they could have done though. It seems like just a limitation of the combat in this game that the boss fights won't be that interesting.
Well, yeah, and it's.
On that front, Rich McLaughlin submitted a comment on Patreon saying, I was very disappointed with the combat of the ending. I spec'd my V out for stealth and hacking, and with the Atom Smasher fight, the game was having none of it. Perhaps my approach was wrong. It really made me appreciate the final boss in Outer Worlds, in which you could lockpick around and simply shut the boss down. All in all, this game was a solid 7, and I wouldn't have spent 60 hours in it without the community of the deepest dive. So thank you. Thank you, Rich.
Yeah, I feel like that's maybe what was missing, is that having that circumvent option. The fact that like all roads lead to him, I think is maybe the part that I'm maybe most upset by. As someone who also was like the stealth person, it feels a little weird for them to say like, no matter what you do, you're gonna have to fight this person, which feels against the spirit of the game. Which before I feel like had more than that kind of approach.
Yeah, but as somebody who is running and gunning their way through this game, I thought that boss fight was cool, and I was just curious, like, man, I wonder what all the hackers are doing here, and the stealth people. I just assumed there was some crazy hacking option available there, whereas I was just hiding behind those server racks and just picking him off with a pistol and 1,000 grenades. I just unloaded every grenade I had on him.
I used cyber psychosis on one of the big boys, the big walkers that came in, and so it was fighting all the other grunts that were coming in. That was kind of cool.
Okay.
But my hacking wasn't maxed out anyway, I guess. Maybe there's some secret thing that would be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I should also say that one of the things that I think is slightly different is that in that playthrough, alt kills almost everyone. Like you don't and like the mechs are turned friendly for you on like that. There's like the basement floor plan.
Yeah.
Did everyone have that?
I think at some point, any ending where you upload alt into the mainframe, she kind of takes control of the entire thing.
For a sequence where you're running through and you just see her hacking everybody, the UI pops up.
I'm jealous you guys got to
the corner and just dying.
You got to encounter alt again? Like, I didn't see any of this. This is all news to me. That's fun.
Yeah.
But so anyway, after that part, you go into the cyberspace, and it was like, I don't know what your experience was with that, Serial, but it was so confusing when you're playing as Johnny, because they kind of break down everything, and they were like, yeah, okay, alt tells you that V's gonna die, but I guess I must have missed some kind of line of dialogue or something, because Johnny's like, oh, don't worry, V, like, I'm going to go and then you're going to have your body back. And so my takeaway from that was going to be like, oh, things are going to be okay. I didn't understand that there was like a 6-month window that V was going to live. But so I was fully on board. Like, this was the story that we had been setting up for hours now of Johnny's going to sacrifice himself. And alt tells you, okay, so you can either walk down this bridge into cyberspace with me, or you can go into this well and you'll go back into V's body. I didn't know what the hell well she was talking about, because I like could not see it. But so I started walking down that bridge, and I was like, okay, I'm doing the thing I'm supposed to be doing. And V starts popping up, and she's like punching me, and she's swearing at me, and she's like, you piece of shit. Like, you promised me that you weren't going to do this, to the point where like 3 times I just stopped, and I was like looking around on this bridge, like, am I going the right way? Like, am I betraying V at this point?
Yeah.
Like, it was so confusing.
I had that thing.
Same thing for me. Yep.
And so I got to the end, and it was like, okay, yes, I am going with alt, but like, talk about such a shitty, like, final interaction between those two characters, having V like completely misunderstand what I was doing, and me just being completely confused as to what was, this sacrifice that I was trying to make. And that like really partially like just was what painted this entire ending as a complete dud for me. But then, as Serial said, like, you wake up in this apartment, Julie was there. And so I was like, okay, this is going well. And then I'm coughing in the shower, and it's like, I got 6 months to live, apparently, which I did not know going into that. And then their relationship is completely poisoned because V's not telling her anything. And so, yeah, then Judy's like, yeah, by the way, like, I'm like, you're being weird, and I'm just going to leave the city now. So my girlfriend broke up with me.
Oh my God.
And then it's like, I'm going into space as like this final thing, which like kind of made sense for V's personality, but it was the least interesting and thing I disliked about her personality the most. This idea of like, I just want to be a living legend in this shitty city,
right?
And so this was her big thing, and she was like, "Don't worry, Judy, wherever you're going, you're going to hear about me, what I have planned." And it's like, this is like such a nihilistic way to end the rest of your life, because basically, Rogue's dead, everyone else is dead in her life, which is thematically kind of an interesting way to end it, but not what I would have chosen. And I felt like this was the smart path to choose by choosing Johnny. Like, this is the way that it should be playing out, and it threw me for such a loop.
Well, I wonder
the bullet
if
points for that one, I think, are like the ones that I do like, where it's like, okay, this happens, and then like, okay, great. I think the way that all those scenes are written, I don't think works. But then to add one extra layer of confusion on my playthrough, like when she was like attacking me or whatever, or telling me to stop, like the subtitles that I was using said Johnny. So I was like, wait, am I V now in Johnny's body in cyberspace? Or like, that ending was really confusing as to what you were choosing to do.
Yes, I completely was. It said get in the well to return to your body, and I was like, no, I think I want to give V back her body. I'm gonna go somewhere else. And then she kicked the shit out of me. I was like, fine, I guess I give you your body by going back to this thing. I guess.
BeatenDownBrian in the chat here, he says, weird. When I did that ending, V wasn't cursing at me. We basically had just a nice goodbye.
Yeah, and I think that is like an interesting thing also to point out, that when you choose to be Johnny with the Rogue ending, you get to talk to V as Johnny, and so you get to see your character, which is, I think, a really cool way to handle that. Yeah. That I think is kind of undercut by the fact that all the endings are third person, and that's where they like, hey, here's the culmination of all your choices, but it's like it's this weird version of that I think those endings should have been in first person.
Also undercut by the fact that my V had 4 shirts on and 3 pairs of shorts on top of her pants.
It's cyberspace. It's crazy with these shirts. They're on sale right now.
And I mean,
I've never seen in the game before.
It also sucked. It's interesting that, someone had a nice conversation there, but like, I was trying so damn hard to be Johnny's friend throughout all of this. And then when I was playing as Johnny, I was trying to be very supportive to V and being like, it's okay, we'll work through this. And
I'm your friend. I wouldn't do this to you.
Yeah. In a sense, it was perfect because those interactions between V and Johnny were just so scattershot throughout this entire game. Like, one minute they seem to be getting along, and then the next minute they're, swearing at each other. And it's like, I got no sense of like relationship growth between those two because it was so hit or miss.
It was hard to know where I was at with Johnny, even though everything up until then was kind of leading my initial playthrough to say like, oh yeah, just give yourself up to someone else, like let them live their life. So I think to me, like the happiest ending is to give Johnny your body, because it feels like, hey, at least he gets to come back. But even that one's just like, the epilogue for that one isn't super great either.
I'm interested in that bit you said, Jeff, where you said that you told Judy, like, hey, I'm going to be a star, you know me. I wonder if that ties back to that early decision then with Dexter Deshawn, because in my ending, there's a moment where Keanu Reeves, he goes, remember what Dex asked you? Quiet life or blaze of glory? Shame you chose the wrong one. Damn shame. And so I wonder if you would have chosen another option there, if that wouldn't have been like V's send off to Judy.
Blaze of Glory is the name of the secret ending.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I don't know. He never mentioned Dexter Deshawn for me. So
right, but maybe he's still just remembering that choice because you probably told Dexter Deshawn that you wanted to go out in a blaze of glory or whatever.
I don't think I told him that.
Exactly my point.
Yeah, because that. I don't remember them like directly saying that, but I guess it would tie in. But from what I've seen of like the ways the ending can go, I think it is more tied to whether you choose Hanako or not Hanako, whether you go into like, I think choosing Hanako gives you the choice of 2 other endings. Yeah. And I think going Rogue or Pan Am basically gives you a choice of 2 other endings that you can't get if you choose Hanako. And then the 5th ending, the secret ending, lets you choose those last 2 ones. Choose whether you want to have Johnny or V be in your body.
Yeah. Okay. So I chose to side with Hanako, where I'm like, I'm Corpo, and I was trying to role play it as somebody who's like, look, I know this corporation sucks, but I hate Johnny, and this is my best chance to get Johnny out of my head, is the idea that they can remove this construct. So I'm going to go with that. But
I was curious what that ending would be, and then I said, you know what, Hansen's going to do it.
And it was not my first instinct. Then I realized, well, I'm the only one who would do this. I guess on the corpo path, I got to bite the bullet here.
Appreciate it.
But it was interesting because I was trying to thread that needle in the roleplay, which was really tough because characters were acting all over the place, and I had so many corpo options where it was just like, Arasaka rules, let's go with it. Like she had some line, which I don't even know was corpo path. Well, I guess it must have been. But she had some line where she's like, look, my life was going great up until the point when I started to basically bite the hand that feeds me and started to go back against the people that were paying my paycheck for so many years. So I'm just going to go back and do this. But it was tough to walk that line because I wanted to just get the construct out of my head, but I also agreed that Arasaka sucked. But the way everybody was acting, like Misty was just like a heap of tears, like, they killed Jackie, what are you doing? Don't get in that limo, because Hellman pulls up in a limo to like bring me to Arasaka Tower. So did you all get anything about, the Arasaka leader and his body being, or his mind being injected into the sun and all that stuff?
Not in any of the other endings.
Okay. Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah. So you go up and work with Hanako. And even though I was skeptical at Arasaka and I was still trying to roleplay like I wasn't on board with them, eventually I came around. I was like, I think I'm on board for this. This is kind of fun just to be a little stinker with Hanako here. So basically, she brings you to this board meeting, which is like, it's bizarre. But anyway, so there's this board meeting and you're going to then testify what's going on. And then it seems like, oh my gosh, what's his name? The brother. But
Very noble.
Yes, he sent a lot of guards and you kind of have to shoot your way out of that. But it's also revealed even before that then that Mr. Papa Arasaka turned himself into a construct and he is alive and well. And so it's interesting when you first see it, you have different options of basically bowing down and being like, oh, Lord Arasaka, great to see you. Or there was an option that was grayed out that if you had enough cool points or whatever, you could tell him that like, hey, Johnny says, F you, dude. And I was so happy because I'd been saving all of my skill points or a lot of skill points and I had just enough to unlock that. It's like, yes, that is exactly the role playing I'm trying to do is still say F you to Arasaka. So I got to say that at least and she like flipped off the hologram on behalf of Johnny, who at this point was completely gone because I had taken those pills. And so on the rooftop was like the end of Johnny, basically. And he had some moment where he's like, well, not the choice I would have gone with, but I don't give a gnat's ass. I'll go ahead and die here. He just kind of has like a quiet goodbye there. But then later on in the epilogue, which we can talk about later, I guess, it's then revealed that Arasaka's construct was actually put into his son. And there were like news reports of people rioting and being pissed about like, you can't do this. You're not God. That's so insane that the rich can't just live on forever. And it's fun sci-fi stuff where on the news, Papa Arasaka had to go on TV and explain that like, this isn't murder. Everyone's saying I murdered my son. But no, he donated his body to me, which wasn't correct. Like the son was violently against his father. But because you work with Hanako, you're able to take over that body. So it's that fun debate about like, no, this is just like donating a kidney. He just donated his body and now I'll live again and now Arasaka will be great. Sorry, I'm curious what you thought about that stretch there.
Yeah, that was definitely like, I've been thinking about AI constructs, just because like between this and Soma and then 13 Sentinels, which I recently played through, like there's a lot of like, well, does this count or not? And this definitely feels like the one where they want you to kind of not like that concept of like, yeah, it would be like, because it would be utilized by the rich over the poor, like basically from its inception. Yeah. It is this weird way to like, yeah, it would be like from a hypothetical level when you talk about it, it's like, oh, wouldn't you want to put your brain on the internet or whatever? Yeah, it'd be cool. But like in practice, you wouldn't get to do that. It would just be like the leaders of like Jeff Bezos would be the one person who would get to do that. And Jeff Bezos would effectively be around forever.
Well, the interesting wrinkle with this game is it would be Grimes that would do that, right? With Elon Musk. And that's like that weird layer of like, why are they in this game where my ending at least is basically eat the rich, forget this crap.
Yeah. And so it is very much like, here's an interesting sci-fi concept. Let's kind of twist it a little bit. So you're like, the context in which it's presented, I think, is also interesting because you're being shown those clips during the epilogue of that section, which Hanson, you probably have the best understanding of what happens after that.
Yeah, so you are in space and you're in like the orbiting station with Arasaka, and it kind of feels like the opening of the Prey reboot where they're just running tests on you. And I think it was really cool. I actually liked my ending a lot, where you wake up and everything's kind of distorted and V is just like, why do I smell purple right now? And they're like, oh yeah, that's synesthesia. We're basically reconnecting a lot of synapses in your brain. So it's going to be really complicated and messy, but we're basically going to get you back to normal. And you can hear like the doctors recording their own like voice recordings about what a miracle that they pulled this off. They say like, we are pioneers, the first to ever separate mentally conjoined twins. Yes, in the end, even the human soul can undergo the knife. And then the fun bit is, as confident as Arasaka is throughout this epilogue, it's a growing theme with V where she's like, I'm not right. Like, I am not me. Something's missing. I don't feel good. And they make you run all these tests where they even have you like go on a treadmill. And then you keep falling on the treadmill. But even to start the treadmill, it was fun because you have to like hold up, which is weird. Like you actually have to walk. It's not just a cutscene. So these tests always go wrong. and then it resets and things are getting a little bit better. They keep trying to have you solve a Rubik's Cube. And it's awesome because there's a moment where you're solving the Rubik's Cube and V is just having a really tough time with it. And she keeps having nightmares about Johnny basically like bringing her into the abyss of space, and she's just floating around, better to connect with how she's just lost this part of herself, with Johnny trying to warn her of that, like, hey, if you're cutting me out of your brain, that's a big chunk of your brain at this point, and it's partly you. Anyways, but there's this moment where she's doing the Rubik's Cube, and then it just like, you're trying to solve it, and you're one click away from solving it, and you're hitting X to try and get it into place. And then she presses it so hard, she snaps it, and she snaps it in half, and then in the middle, there's like this ghost demon face. It's like, bah! And she's like this crazy jump scare out of nowhere. It's freaking nuts.
So that what that image is throughout the game, you're collecting the tarot cards.
Yeah.
That's the devil tarot card, which I think is supposed to broadcast, I think, death or whatever, misfortune or whatever.
Which Misty tried to warn me about that was my tarot card. Yeah, when I was getting into the limo. Oh, that's interesting.
So that is a pretty cool sequence. And then I think you end up having to make another choice, which is kind of because you go through these loops as V kind of like over and over. There's like their kind of quick cut thing again happens again, but it's like every day you're waking up and doing this and you're not making any progress. And you can go around the room and break stuff. There's a section where you can just run around and break stuff and then go to sleep. And then at some point they're like, turns out we didn't actually fix you. Like we removed Johnny, but you're still going to die. Here's what you can do.
Right, but we removed Johnny, but that ended up messing with your DNA in some pivotal way. So we can either upload you to Mikoshi and you can live forever there, or you can go back to Earth and die. And I was very curious. I mean, the epilogue, I really enjoyed it. I was trying to get a sense of, is Arasaka still going to brag about this achievement that they've separated mentally conjoined twins? If I go back to Earth, are they going to disavow me? I don't know exactly what happens there. They didn't really go into it. But yeah, you have that option. But they're like, if you are uploaded here, you know, Arasaka will basically own your soul forever. We can do whatever we want with you. It was kind of the fine print you have to sign off on. So I said, nah, I'm going to go back to Earth and just die on my own. And then, it's that third person shot of V walking to the airlock, and then she actually sings a song to herself, which is really strange. I don't know what song it is.
It's so weird. It's so weird that they present that one as like, you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna live. But it's like, to me, that feels like the like lose ending, because it's like, okay, so you pissed off everybody you know. You go into space and that didn't even work. So you're still going to die.
Yeah.
So it's like, you're basically screwed. Like the last 6 months of your life are going to suck because no one likes you. But then like they present it as like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to go back down to Earth and I'm going to live it up. I'm going to live out the rest of my days. So that one was really weird. And then like the upload yourself into into Mikoshi thing is like, I guess this is the most self-preservationist thing of like, I'm going to do whatever I can. So that one feels, if you're going to go the corporate route, the most appropriate.
Yeah.
But it's also like the darkest one of just like, I tried to escape the machine, didn't happen. I'm now literally a cog in that machine.
Right. So with your perspective, Cyril, having seen all these, which is the best? I mean, is mine maybe the coolest, but just the darkest, or how would you
kind of interesting? I think, but it definitely feels like a very different turn than the game takes. Where, to be fair, they don't really present either of those options as like super cool. Like, so they do kind of push the idea of like, well, if you're siding with the corpos, you kind of like it can only go poorly.
Yeah.
So I do think for me, probably, even if it's not written super well, I think the ending where you give your body to Johnny is maybe the most like the best ending thematically, because like that in that one you kind of, I'm not sure why, but you don't get to replace anybody, like, because when you choose V, you're like, okay, I have this huge house, Judy doesn't like me anymore, but hey, I'm the fixer in Night City at this point. But if you choose to have Johnny take over, he just lives in an apartment next to this kid. And it's kind of like it feels like the first episode of Cobra Kai, where it's just like he just happens to live next to this kid, and he kind of like stops him from getting his ass kicked basically by in this case it's his dad. And then he has the kid drive him around to a guitar shop to get like, here's a super expensive guitar. And then he plays the kid like, oh, here's how I'm going to prove to you that I'm like secretly Johnny, but don't tell anybody. So he plays like a riff from a samurai riff on his guitar. And then he's like, well, I'm going to leave. I don't like this town. I can't take this town because it reminds me of V, because you go visit V's memorial.
Yes.
And also whoever ends up dying in your ending, which in that case was Rogue. And so you visit their graves, and then you leave on a bus, and then the kid runs up to you. It's like, hey, you left the guitar in the car. And he's like, no, I didn't. And then he drives off like, I'm going to be my own man. I get to start my life again, basically.
And that's the one you got, Leo?
Yeah, that was my ending. Little deepest dive note. When his dad hits him and you walk to the car, one of your possible dialogue options is you shouldn't talk back like that. Which is like one of the darkest dialogue options in any Renegade Paragon type of game I played.
Yeah, for sure.
There's the part where you visit the columbarium and you put your mementos in Rogue and V's little grave boxes. Because, no one survives in that.
Right. And I think a minor note like that, well, maybe not minor, but like a note that we kind of skimmed over was that like the little pendant that you have, which is like the necklace of the bullet.
Yeah.
I think basically ends the connection between them. Because, when you're Johnny, you kind of use it to like, I'm going to memorialize V. And when you're V, you use it to memorialize Johnny, which I think is a pretty cool, like, thing that kind of only a video game can do, is to have a thing mean different things depending on which ending you take. So it's kind of like, it is literally their connections, right? So depending on who you choose.
For me, the last thing that happens right before the cut to credits is V like rips the necklace off, like, F this.
Yeah. So like real quick, the kind of the fifth ending is if you have your relationship either if your relationship is built up enough with Johnny, like that percentage bar, or you choose certain dialogue options during the Johnny quest, like the Johnny quest line. If you wait, I think the thing that I saw said like 5 minutes. He says like, okay, well, how about this? What if it's just you and me and we just go out in a blaze of glory? We just go in, like we don't dig under the building or invade it with like with an airstrike. What if we just run into the building and try to see how far we can get and die in a blaze of glory? And of course, and like the thing about that ending though is that like that's a cool thing, that's interesting thematically, but you can still get to the it's a video game, so you're meant to get to the end of Mikoshi. It's not like they're not going to get held up at the door and immediately die, like, because which is what would happen if it were a movie, right? It's just like, yeah, they're not going to get in there and get all the way to Mikoshi by themselves, but you still can, like, okay, I'm going to take on Adam Smasher by myself. And it's actually kind of cool because it's like Johnny really steps up and becomes like the character in your ear the entire time of like, okay, these guys are over here, you're going to have to do this. And then he suddenly becomes smart enough to pull off this plan by himself. Which is very weird, but I do like the idea of like, okay, we're gonna die, but we want to get as far as possible, which I think is a cool twist. And then that ends up leading you to the like, give my body to Johnny or go as V.
Gotcha. So Jaron, real quick, submits a comment about that. He says, I still have yet to complete the game, but I do know a little about the way the game's endings work. What's fascinating is that the Zen Master side quest reveals the way to get the game's quote-unquote best ending, the one that you just described, Serial. Instead of making a choice right away when the dialogue prompt comes up, you wait until a fourth option appears. The Zen Master alludes to this on his final quest when he talks about the patience being the key to the correct path.
Oh, interesting.
Do you buy that, Leo, or do you think that's a happy coincidence?
No, I definitely think it's a tease. I don't know if it's enough of a tease where it's like, oh, I should have put that together.
Yeah, that sort of. And then real quickly, there is another option, which just a quick content warning for suicide if you want to skip the next.
Hang on, can we let the comments read it here? They have thoughts on this. So Lewis Kane says, I originally went with the suicide option. I thought it might make sense for V's character, but Jesus Christ, it was awful. The phone calls in the credits from both Pan Am and Judy were honestly so bad, Judy especially, as my V was in the relationship with her and I never even gave it a thought to how it might impact her after everything that happened to Evelyn. But you better believe that I didn't go to bed for another 2 hours in order to get the Pan Am ending, which is without a doubt the best ending in the game. And Joshua Duproy says, so I too went with the suicide option to see if the game would really end there, and it did. So this is like on the roof by the chairs looking at the city. You just have that option of like, oh, I'll just go ahead and end it there. So Joshua says, to my surprise, the final scene between V and Johnny is genuinely touching. Instead of fighting back, Johnny accepts V's decision and even comes to respect it at the end. The testimonials during the ending are absolutely heart-wrenching, and I admit I almost shed a tear during Judy's considering everything she went through over the course of the game. Of course, because I'm not insane, I went back and beat the game with both Pan Am and Rogue. I'm glad this game was still chosen as the deepest dive, and I don't know if I would have completed it otherwise. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, I think the more I thought about that last ending, I think it's like one of the more interesting approaches to that, because I don't think that it's like a good ending thematic. It's probably like the worst one. You don't necessarily want to choose it. But I like that they're thorough enough to it to make it an option to reject, you know, like the fact that it's like, because when I was doing the Pan Am ending, they basically tell you like, oh, if you like at some point you split up with part of your crew and someone ends up more or less dying, and then no matter what you do, someone ends up dead. So I did at one point while I was doing all the other endings thinking was like, well, I'm basically trading my life for someone else's, right? Like Saul or Rogue or whoever ends up dying. Like like we're doing all this just so I can get to live. And obviously the Aldecados have their ulterior motives, but I did make that math at some point. So the ending, like when you're like, well, I don't want to trade anyone else's life for mine, that mathematically makes sense. But I like that if you do choose that option, that they kind of do put you through the ringer of like, suicide is not just the thing that affects the person who does it, right? Like, and so everyone is just like, here is a list of all the people that it would affect if you were to end your life here. And I'm actually pretty glad that everyone who did get that ending decided to do another ending instead.
Right.
And that's why I like it overall. Not to say that like I like it in the sense that I would choose it, but I like that it is there as an option to see, well, what would happen if I did this and then reject it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Cream Agree says, I feel like I received the perfect ending to the Street Kid playthrough with the Pan Am ending. Street Kid V was someone who loved Night City but was desperate to escape. V riding into the sunset with Pan Am, unsure of what the future holds, searching for a solution for the terminal problem within his head. I love it. I hope everyone's ending was as satisfying and emotional as mine.
Yeah, so that's like, I was surprised because you're going through a lot of the same things. The same problem is still present at the end of it, but the way they present it to you is so different in tone that it really ends up feeling like you walk away with it with a completely different feeling. And like the mission into it is completely different. Like you end up going back to the camp and that's the part, Serial, right, where they basically make you an official party like member of the nomad group, and so like that lead up mission is really just kind of going out and hanging out in the desert and like meeting everyone and kind of talking through what the ultimate plan is going to be, and then you have a big assault on the way in so that you can drill a tunnel into the base of the tower and whatnot. And so like that whole mission was fine in terms of gameplay, but it really, we've talked a couple times about how like the game kind of presents you with a lot of things, but doesn't really make any of its own calls, or doesn't really try and point you towards like, this is a good thing or this is a bad thing.
Yeah.
But this ending especially kind of, it feels like it's drawing conclusions about its own world and like the importance of having friends and, like the community that you make around you and everything like that.
Yeah.
But so you basically you play through this mission, you get into the basement of the tower, and then Alt kicks in and she kills everyone again. But you find, I don't know if I just missed it in the Johnny Rogue playthrough, but in this one, Saul very much calls out like, holy shit, some of those people were just scientists and she like murdered everybody there.
Yeah.
And which they're much more upset about than either Johnny or Rogue were.
Yeah, I think this ending does have like the strongest writing, like as an experience, as a level, as a section of the game. I think it's probably the best one because it is like you're doing an actual mission that feels different from the rest of the game, and that you get to use the tank, and then you like, well, the tank is like not working. You have to get out and actually do a little bit of shooting, then get back in the tank and keep drilling. Like it feels the most like a heist.
Yeah.
And also like just hanging out with Pan Am is cool because she's like a really fun character. But yeah, it made me question the entire time, like, I don't think I should have gotten these people involved. But once you make that choice, I think it's probably the most solid section of the game ending.
How is Alt? I was curious to see more of her. Like, what does she say to Johnny? I remember the last time I saw her, she's like, I'm not even Alt anymore. Is that just more and more clear that she's not a being?
Yeah. It's an interesting conversation when you meet up with her. She's on board immediately. It's like, can we convince Alt to do this? And she immediately not only is on board, but knows what you're there to talk to her about. And they have an interesting conversation about how Johnny overestimates who he is and how he is just a construct. He is a set of data that she can read and analyze.
Like so, both she's like, well, why are we having this conversation in the first place? And it's like, well, it says more about you, how you approach this versus anything else. But the contents of this conversation are already basically obvious to me.
That's fun. Tactical Dreamer says, I found the Nomad ending to be very nonsensical. Tens of hours before I got the ending, Pan Am sent me a message claiming her and Saul had something worked out to help me with my brain problem. But after calling her in the final mission and telling her about Mikoshi, they just come up with a slapdash plan to storm Arasaka Tower, and a bunch of their people get killed in the process, including Saul. The Eldecados also seem to jettison back and forth between liking you and hating you throughout the entire final mission, which is very jarring. Also, the big tank kept breaking down, and I didn't really understand why. The whole ending seemed very half done.
Yeah, I want to say that the whole like, hey, we have something for your problem. I think that is the tank, because I think they know that you're going to at some point storm Arasaka. So I think
there's something to help with your brain. It's a tank.
Well, I think it's just like with your brain problem, right? So I think that might be what they're referring to. I'm not totally sure, but I do think that it is like the bullet points I think make the least sense to involve them. But I think that once you get into it, I think it's like, it's hard. It's easy to forget all that, because I think it is kind of the most hopeful ending in that, like, here's my found family. I don't like, my origins are almost kind of unimportant. Like where I came from doesn't matter. Where I am is what matters. And like, here's this found family that I like. And so this is the thing that matters to me most.
Yeah. I also like the lead up into that one where it's like, you make the decision that you're going to go with them. You call Pan Am and she's like, it's the middle of the night. Like, what are you doing? And you're like, I'm going to, like, I need to break into Arasaka Tower and I have to do it now. Otherwise I'm going to die. She's like, okay, where are you? And you tell her, you know, I'm at Vic's or whatever. And she's like, okay, I'll be there in like 10 minutes. And like from that point on, like the entire family is just behind you and they're going to help you however they can.
That's awesome.
And they basically inaugurate you as an Eldecado, and they give you a pretty cool jacket. And yeah, I also was like, it was hard not for me to like see Saul, who's been kind of a dick the whole game. And at some point they're like, oh yeah, we just patched it up just enough so that you care when he dies. But when he died, I was like, okay, great. At least it's not Pan Am. Like this is almost as good as I could have asked for. Is like Saul is no longer in my life. I get to it's just Pan Am leading the Eldecados now. Great.
And yeah, and that is kind of, it's a weird, like, very shrewd math too, in terms of like, well, someone's going to die here. These two are still butting their heads. Saul's been kind of a dick and doesn't really know how to run the family anyway. And so, and Adam Smasher, like, really the rogue death is kind of drawn out where he like punches through her and it's, you know, like this big climatic moment. In the Saul death, like Adam Smasher busts through the gate and like he's on the ground, he picks up his gun and Adam Smasher just steps on his head and it explodes and like that is it.
Yeah.
And then he starts coming after you. But the cyberspace conversation happens after that as well. It's basically after you fight Adam Smasher, it's the same thing where you like crawl into the room and sink into the jacuzzi with like the thing in your head. And then you go into cyberspace, but now you are playing as V again. And so like the conversation makes more sense and it's not as broken. And at least like this time I actually figured out where the well was.
You have a much better read of what your options are if you choose that, if that's how you get to that ending.
Yeah, and it was also an interesting conversation because you kind of go through it and at one point, you know, like V's the one who has to grapple now with like, well, okay, do I go back into my body and Johnny dies, or Johnny can actually live out a full life if he takes my body? And I think at that point you can ask Alt, like, what should I do? And I chose that one because it was just a blue text, you know, so it doesn't really matter to the overall decision. And I was expecting a whole like, well, you know, it's your choice. You should do what feels right or whatever. But she's like, you should come with me. Like, this is what makes sense for you. And I was like, nah, I'm not coming with you though. Sorry. But then when you choose the well, you get into it and you do have at least a nice little moment of Johnny like wishing you away and being like, whatever you do, just don't stop fighting. And then like you sink down into the little well back to your body. And then the like from that point on, it is so much more upbeat because yes, you're still supposedly going to die in 6 months, but like the conversation that you have with Panam, you're pulled off to the side of the road and you're just kind of looking at this gorgeous vista of the city. And she asks how you're doing, and you just say like, well, you know, the drugs that Vic gave me are starting to help now. And then and Panam's like, oh, don't worry, like we have a ton of contacts. Once we get down south, like we're gonna figure something out. And it's even if it's, you know, like it kind of trivializes the like that you have this fatal thing that no one has been able to figure out. And it feels like you can buy into it just because like V has had impending hanging over her head the entire game, and she's always kind of figured a way through it. And so like it really ends up feeling like a much more optimistic take on it. And then once you get back to the camp, like Judy's there because she has decided she's also going to leave the city, and you have a very nice conversation with her where she's still, you know, like not sure about everything that's going on, but like by the end of that conversation, she is completely on board, and you two are, you know, this happy couple, and everyone around you at that point is like, this is a new beginning. This is a new life that we're going to have. Thank God we're finally getting out of this shitty city, which feels like a really weird kind of final take for CD Projekt Red to give you after they've spent so much time building the city, and the entire game is
that's
about
like the best thing is like that city rules. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It does feel like that ending felt like the most kind of down to earth in terms of like reaction to like a fatal illness, because I think it's almost like them closing the loop, because I think after the end of Act 1, when you come out and you realize, okay, you're going to die, and you have kind of like a pretty heavy moment where you realize that that's going to happen, and you just kind of sit there for a while thinking like this is it. Like, unless obviously like the plans come together later on, but it's like just you sitting there with Misty thinking like, look, we have these pills. It's going to be okay. We're going to deal with this. And at that point, you don't really have anybody. You've lost your family. So you're like, well, I need to do this, I need to put together this plan because I have no one else around me. I need I am the most important person to myself. So I need to live as long as possible. So then that ending feels like okay, look, you're going to pass away at some point, but you have these people who care about you, and it's going to be okay. I feel like that to me is like the most optimistic take on like having a fatal illness, which I think is maybe like, and I think that's to me why I think this is overall probably the one you should pick, even if it's not thematically appropriate, because it feels like it deals with the idea of you are going to die. What do you do if you have, X number of days left to live?
Yeah. Guy Incognito, so it's coming on Patreon, saying, quote, I want you to be amazed that any of us had a chance to be here at all. And that's from Edith Finch. He said, in what ended up being a complimentary pairing, I decided to finally play What Remains of Edith Finch before December 10th. I played the first half but didn't get around to completing it until after the 130 hours spent in Cyberpunk. Both games are about embracing life, what little of it some may have. As credits rolled for Edith Finch, I felt for the Finches, but started getting emotional, reflecting on V's relationships, like Panam, Judy, Rogue. They're all relationships I had an active role in developing. That's one magical element to gaming's interactivity. I chose to go scuba diving. I chose to joyride in a hover tank. I chose to go to the drive-in, whereas the Finches are just people Giant Sparrow told me I had a relationship with. Agency made for powerful connections. The salt on the rim of this mortality cocktail was my mind going back to Cyberpunk's credits and the messages highlighting the impact of V's life on others. And then a guy quotes Keanu Reeves, I think on Colbert's Late Show. Do you remember this? Where Colbert asked Keanu Reeves what happens when you die? And Keanu Reeves took a beat, and then he just goes, I know that the ones who love us will miss us. And then Colbert was devastated, just floored. Jesus Christ. And then Guy says, also Soul came out the next week after Cyberpunk. What a month. I guess a lot of creators are at that age where they're contemplating mortality. Yeah, creators are old these days, guys. No, there is. I mean, it's probably a coincidence, but we talked about it a little bit, I think, in the developer roundtable we had on our channel about just 2020 is a weird year for talking about death in one of the deadliest years, for the world, and then for the US in particular, right? With the pandemic, it is just a weird overall theme to a lot of media this year, is just dealing with death, mortality, mythology. It's a cosmic year.
Yeah, and certainly a lot of I want to be remembered as a driving force of motivations. I feel like I've been seeing a lot recently, and I think a connecting thread between pretty much all these endings is how empty of a pursuit that is. Try to be a legend is your end goal.
Right.
How there's not that much you'll really get out of that.
Yeah. Do you feel like the game comes down on Johnny for still being an idiot by the end, even in his construct form, for thinking that he should be a legend?
I mean, in the way that he's punished, even in my ending, which I kind of was bummed out by at the time, but it's grown on me just for how dark it is of it being Johnny. You being Johnny, you mourn Rogue and V, and you get on a bus and you leave Night City. And there's, you get the nice moments with Steve where you kind of can choose to like give him tips on how to like write songs and how to break out of the crappy life he is stuck with right now. But the mood of leaving on that bus, it was like, God, this all sucked. This was such a series of random occurrences that really was so unfortunate. And it feels like, credit to that ending, it felt like the ending to me. It felt like the production value was there and the threads were all connected in a way where I was satisfied with the conclusion that, damn, all our goals didn't work out and we kind of were stupid for having them.
But yeah, I mean, I guess, isn't it all just connecting all the different endings here with just that theme of tying a little bit of what Suriel was talking about just it's reflection on mortality, reflection on what's important in life. That's what this gigantic game is trying to get at. And I applaud it for at least having that unified vision across such a sprawling game.
And all the voicemails in the end of that ending aren't like, always remember you, V. It's, where are you, V?
Yeah, right.
What's up? I haven't heard from you. And a little Pan Am trivia. This might be specific because I wasn't able to finish Pan Am's quest line because of a bug locked me out of it. But she calls and she's like, hey, V, don't know where you are, but if you have any work you could toss my way, I could really use some money right now. Which was a little bummer to get not just what they thought of you, but a feel of where their lives are at post the events of the game.
I had Misty call me and she left a voicemail that I listened to when I was going to say I listened to in space, but I guess it was just in the credits, where she just left me a voicemail and she's like, I'm doing another tarot card reading and it's real bad. It's real bad. Okay, bye, V. It's like, why even make that call, Misty? Thanks a lot, buddy.
I got the phone and then the frowny face, so I thought I should call you and scare you.
Yeah, and which like her tarot reading for the Pan Am ending, like, doesn't even mention your death at that point anymore. It's like, it's all rosy, like you're going to be rich and you're in love and all, all that. And then the cool one was Judy calls and she's like, hey, V, I know it's a little weird that I'm recording this when you're right in the other room making breakfast for us, but I'm not good with my feelings. And so I just wanted to tell you, I love you or whatever. And then like V interrupts it and is like, get out here for breakfast. And it's like, that's about as good as you can ask.
Hey, Leo, I didn't know we were playing a Call of Duty game. Special shout out to, hang on, does anybody else want to laugh at that joke? The floor is now open.
Shout out to all our patrons for making that joke possible.
Shout out to Sergio Vasquez for years ago having the idea of going to a tarot card reader to predict what was happening at E3. That's still on Game Informer's YouTube channel. And do you remember when we were, Leo, you helped film that, right? You were there, Leo. Do you remember when we were leaving and then the tarot guy is like, so you guys are going to E3, like that big convention? And he's like, he was still weirded out by his own card readings. Remember this? Where he's like, I'm just going to say, keep your eyes open. Going to be a lot of people there. Keep your eyes peeled for some danger. And of course, a shooting had just happened not that long before. And every day. Well, not the last year, actually. We've been pretty good about it. Maybe it's happening in houses. I'm not sure. But the point is, then we went back to the office. And I remember just like mentioning that offhand. And I remember like Reiner in the office in particular, he's like, wait, what did he say? Seriously, what did he say? Like Reiner got really freaked out by it. But like there is something so unnerving about tarot card readers, even though I think we're all on the same page that it's a bunch of nonsense.
Whoa.
How dare you say that?
I'm sorry. People in the Backstage Pass, let us know how you feel about tarot cards.
Cosmos.
I mean, there is always like a Pascal's wager of like, well, you know, like if you believe that and you heed their warning, it's like there's no harm in that, right? But it was definitely a thing where it's like, if anything does happen, I will definitely remember this moment.
Right.
Pascal's wager posits that humans bet with their lives that God either exists or does not.
That it's more beneficial to believe in God than it isn't, because there's no harm in following God or whatever.
I see.
Leo, I've been meaning to ask you, I need a final verdict on BS or not BS.
God.
So close. So when I was like 3 or 4, my dad got into a really bad cross-country skiing accident, like effed up his back. And he was in surgery for a long time. They ended up putting like steel rods in his back and all that. And so, you know, he thought he was going to die and stuff. And during the surgery, the story he always told me was that he had a vision during the surgery where he talked to his 3 kids when they were adults. Did that happen?
And he said they looked like you guys look?
That's the second part of this story, which really weirds me out, is then in high school, it was like towards the end of high school, my dad went in and, because he always had back problems, and so he actually got the steel rods removed from his back. And like before he went in for the surgery, he like gave an extra emotional message / goodbye to all of his kids. And the part that killed me is he goes, I just want to mention, like, I know I told you that I talked to you all when you were adults, when I had my last surgery. And you were the age that you are now when I talked to you. So goodbye. It was very emotional and alarming to be like, wait, so you're saying that it's going to be a full circle and you're going to die on this operating bed? And he didn't.
Or he talks to his kids.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a very confusing thing. So what's going on there, Leo? Did that happen or?
You're asking, was he cyberpunk for having steel rods put in his back?
That's what I'm asking. Yay or nay?
Very cyberpunk.
Vic gives it 2 thumbs up. Cool. Thanks for getting to the
I
bottom
don't think
of
he
that
would
one.
have referenced it if it hadn't actually happened to him.
What's that?
I think if he had made that up and was like, here's a fun story to scare my kids, I don't think that he brings it up again when
I don't think
Was
he was
that
trying
your question,
to.
Hanson? Whether he was lying to you or not?
Yeah, you're wondering if he really communed, right?
That's committing to debate if he made it up. But also, it's like, what is he expecting to do with that information when he's like, oh yeah, by the way, that thing I mentioned, that shot I called earlier, it's coming in now.
He was trying to call his shot like Babe Ruth, like I'm gonna die in this operation, I think was what he was going for. By the way, E.N.T. Clark,
Pascal's wager.
Himself. Is that what he?
What's that?
He pointed out to the outfield to indicate a home run, but then he pointed again to himself.
That's right. He pointed at the Grim Reaper in the outfield, who was just pointing back at him.
It's right there.
Yeah.
He dropped his bat and ran.
E.N.T. Clark in the Backstage Pass says, I was clinically dead once. Sudden arrest. E.N.T. Clark, we will wait. You tell us that story. Tell us what it's like to be dead, because we've just been going off what V's been talking about. And she makes it seem scary.
Read a sick joke on Twitter, and he replied, dead.
Yes, I think that's what probably he's going for. Does anyone want to guess what E.N.T. Clark went through? He says, I have no memory of it.
I'm going to say drugs, but not necessarily like the legal kind were involved. Some sort of medical or drug related thing.
Oh, no, he already said it. He said he just has no memory of being dead. So that's nice, I guess. Oh, wait, he said drugs make you forget. So we should all take drugs before we die? Is that what you're going for, E.N.T. Clark? Okay. That's very complicated.
But then at the end, you won't remember.
Deepest Dive has really gone off the rails.
Or is it finally on the rails? Jeffem, are you? Do you think about death a lot?
No.
When is the last time you really thought about the fact that you're going to die?
Right now.
Come on.
I'm wasting my life.
Dead air, indeed. Really, it's just something you don't consider, though?
Oh,
Did you know that you will?
No, I'm holding out hope. I'm gonna go south, and we're gonna figure out a cure.
Oh boy! All right, that's yes ending, baby. Another robot submits a comment saying, "I'm struggling with the endings. As I played through each, I found them all to be unsatisfying. Playing as Gay V, Victor, parentheses, as another robot. The supposedly good conclusion had had Carrie breaking up with me, then living as a nomad. Sure, I survived, but honestly, is it worth it if I have to live in camps roaming the country without Carrie? That's my nightmare. If this turns out to be CD Projekt Red's canon ending for the game, I can't help but feel completely let down and sad. But maybe that's just Cyberpunk? Happiness is only something you experience in BDs.
Oh. But that means someone has to experience happiness to record it.
Yeah, and I hope it's not that crucifixion guy. Yikes. Whoa. I'm a biggie boy. Right sentence says, when I last wrote in, I was hopeful that Jackie... Okay, this freaked me out. This made me think that I missed so much with my ending. When I last wrote in, I was hopeful that Jackie being locked in Mikoshi as a construct would allow me to do right by him somehow. I jacked into Mikoshi and followed the path up to the spot Misty takes you to where you talk about Jackie. Did everybody do this? Does anybody know? Okay, this is mind-blowing. And there he was waiting for me. Unfortunately, he was only a shell of himself, maybe because he was dead already when they used Soulkiller on him. First, he recognizes me, calling me brother. When I ask him how he got in Mikoshi, he's confused and introduces himself, saying he hit the major leagues working with Dex, the Black Jesus of the afterlife. I can't tell if Dex got imprisoned too, or if Jackie has just lost it. He has moments of clarity too, calling you V, saying Misty knew, Misty always knows, references how she felt about the heist. You can keep talking in circles, but it's clear his mind is fried. I say goodbye and release the prisoners of Mikoshi beyond the Black Wall to assimilate with Alt. I hope that helps him. Leaving the city with Pan Am after all that's happened seemed like the right way to end my V's story. And then Case Mulder here replied to that comment saying, I think the thing with Jackie, something about this is explained somewhere. I think it boils down to him being pulled with Soulkiller, but a weaker variation which does not preserve the full mind. This as opposed to the advanced relic variation which Saburo is trying to make for himself and which makes with Johnny. Did anybody have this weird reunion with Jackie?
I never saw Johnny in any of the endings. I wonder what the
Jackie
to trigger him in Mikoshi is.
I think it's because we all sent him to his family instead of sending him to Vic, which is where he was body napped.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. That's cool though. I'm glad that they follow up on Jackie in that way.
Yeah, I also wonder would that have made you more hesitant to upload yourself into the computer if you had encountered that? But I guess you don't encounter that in the either.
Yeah. I didn't think it was going to end well either way that I uploaded myself into that computer. It's just a way for basically Arasaka to wipe me off the books. I felt really dumb where this morning I had an epiphany where I was like, wait, what about Takamura? I don't remember the last time I talked to Takamura. He wasn't in my credits, I don't think.
Did you save him?
When? Was that option?
After the parade mission, you have to go to the safe house to meet Hanako. He brings you to the safe house because he kidnapped Hanako, remember?
Yeah, and this is the one where the doll comes in to talk?
Isn't it Hanako?
Yeah, Hanako is the doll.
Yeah, Hanako's in the room, and then Adam Smasher breaks through the wall with a bunch of guys.
Oh yeah.
And then you fall down 5 floors or whatever.
Right.
And what was interesting about that mission, we didn't talk about that one, but your objective when you get up is to just get out of the building. And Johnny's like, you got to get out of here. And V's like, oh no, I have to go try and save Takamura. And he's like, oh, he's a gun or whatever. And the objective just says get out of the building. But at that point, my charge jump, legs, my little charge legs.
Yeah.
And so I just jumped right back up through the floor, like the 3 stories or whatever.
Oh, funny.
And when you get up there, there's still a bunch of soldiers there and Takamura's fighting them. And then your objective changes to save Takamura as an optional objective.
Oh,
and
okay.
then you can fight your way out of it with him.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I don't think I did that. So I guess he just died there? That's weird.
I think so.
I never saw Takamura after that, so because I didn't have the super jump.
So
that's cool that you.
I think there is an alternative route that you can find, but a guide said that it was pretty hidden. But if you do save him, you don't really. I think he talks to you once or twice over the phone. He basically says I'm in hiding now. But that was another one of the just great parts of that first ending that just pissed me off was because you finally get a call from him, which I saved his life, but then I didn't go through I guess he wants you to do the Hanako ending or whatever, but he gives this long speech, which he references seppuku again, because that's,
this is defining trait, sure.
Characters do, yep. But he says, like, when people are going to commit seppuku, they write a long, like, death poem that basically sums up all of their feelings. Then he says, but, I don't have the time or the words for it, so just rotten hell shithead. And then just hangs up on you. I think it's shithead. It's kuso ana, which he says.
You translated it?
Ama, and I think ama's short for atama, which is head. I'm not sure. Kuso is definitely shit. So he told me to rotten hell something, and then just hung up on me. And so that was my thanks for saving him. And cool. Then Judy broke up with me right after that. So, what a ending. Thanks, guys.
Oh, boy. John Skovic submits a comment saying, I thought it might be a unique perspective here to talk about what happens towards the end if you've done no side content and V has no friends. I didn't like this game very much at all, says John. Before you embark on your big final mission, you go up to the roof above Victor's place. You have the option, I assume, to call your romantic partner one last time. It almost seems like they didn't account for people not having a romantic partner. You get sat down and are told to call someone, and V says, yeah, good idea. Then your only dialogue option is, nah, I'm good. Then you stand back up without calling anyone. Similarly, during the credits when people are calling you, they had almost nothing to say. Judy just says, hey, we haven't talked in a while. Hope you're okay. Some guy named Saul was on my screen for less than 30 seconds total. He told me if I ever need anything, he's my guy. Takamura was dead, so he was a total no-show. To me, it felt right that V should die friendless and alone with how obnoxious and whiny they were, so I was satisfied enough. P.S. P.S. That driving Miss Daisy reference in the final mission was insane, right? That's an insane thing to put in your video game set in an alternate universe 100 years after the movie came out. I think that was Hellman, if he's driving you on the Arasaka choice. He makes a driving Miss Daisy reference, which definitely stood out to me too. Like, I guess the movie came back in popularity. Everybody does the driving Miss Daisy brain dance, apparently.
Interesting input. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I like that path. Jordan Edmond notes that he thought the Arasaka ending was definitely the most interesting because of the consequences it has on the world and how the epilogue was structured, but it was definitely the biggest bummer. Yeah, I guess, we're all dying here. John Kalafatis writes in and says, the final chapter of this game really ruined my overall impression of it. I forget exactly when it happened, but shortly after visiting Hanako, I started feeling like so many of my choices weren't being respected by V. I started to really lose any connection I had with my V. Just something I think we've talked about. Just it's tough to roleplay this game at times. Mm-hmm. Donnie submits a comment saying, not thrilled with my ending. I made the choice to let Johnny take over my body to attack Arasaka, not thinking I wouldn't be playing as my V for more in the story. Then we get into the net and randomly it doesn't matter what we did because V was doomed. Suddenly I had to make a choice. It was not clear what each one meant, and the epilogue was basically Johnny is alive in V's body and just leaves the city. Credits roll with phone calls from people V knew, wondering where they are. Pan Am seemed to know and threatens Johnny, but then the next call is from someone else in the Eldecados and they have no clue. I like that idea that Pan Am is aware of what's going on here because you told everything to her. Nick Wright, I went with the option of heading off into the internet and giving my body to Johnny. It seemed like the only option where V even had a slim chance of survival. That being said, I've read about a few of the other endings and it seems like there's maybe no happy ending for V, and that disappoints me. I don't have a drive to go mop up side quests if it's essentially all V's bucket list. Bucket list. Yeah, that's fair. Which ties into John Ford's comment. He says, so when you kill Atom Smasher, you get an access token. But at least for me, the ending I picked, I immediately leave the city and never come back. It gives me an option to reload my last open world save, but any progress and inventory is lost, including the access token. I looked it up and it has something to do with Mr. Smasher's secret stash on that ship, but how do I use that access token? After Fallout 3's backlash and backpedaling on this, how could any open world game repeat the mistake of endings that don't let you continue after finishing the main story?
Well, I mean, they're saying they'd rather have it drop you into the open world with no explanation, but it's like, here, just keep playing instead of saying this is before V dies.
Yeah. I wonder if they would ever patch that in. I mean, I don't know how much, well, I guess Johnny, that's a big factor for having him not be there.
I guess then the other alternative is to make any ending where you get to live out the rest of your days that post game of like, hey, okay, well, you only have 6 months to live, but you should go do all these side quests. which I guess would be weird because then everyone would immediately get those endings instead of any of the ones that closed you off.
Yeah. Having a material best ending like that would probably be the wrong call.
Yeah, Aaron Vasquez commented on John Ford's comment here and says that it lets you keep it in terms of the access token. I picked up some legendary iconics that were in my stash when I reloaded. So at the end of the credits, I believe, where it's like, do you want to keep playing or go back to the menu? If you go to keep playing, you get to keep all that stuff you collected, which is nice.
That said, I kind of appreciate that there is no ending where V gets to live, because I think I like them being very adamant about like, well, there's no magical cure or whatever. You're going to have to figure out how you're going to, like, faced with this difficult choice. Here's what you need to do with your final days, right? Like, I like that they make the choice about what are you going to do, knowing that this is for sure going to happen, versus like, well, if you actually do this ending, then you get to live. I like that they kind of try to not kind of wash that part of the game away.
I mean, they kind of do that, but the Pan Am ending is the most open-ended of like, well, maybe there's a magic cure out there and we're starting a new life and we're going to look for that.
Yeah. But even then it's not like, well, now like there's no ending where that problem is solved as far as you know, right?
Yeah. Talking about playing after the ending. Yeah, I do. I think at some point I might drop in there and finish off side quests and then go get a better ending. But that is always weird to me when I have to go do side quests instead of like, the character has said I have 12 hours before my brain explodes, but I'm just going to go do these side quests forever. It made me excited for the multiplayer we'll be getting in however many years, where I can just have that kind of living in Night City experience, which is still my favorite part about the game, but without these story pressures taking me out of who I want to be and what I want to be doing.
Yeah, I was interested that they had multiplayer leads in the credits. Didn't seem like the entire team, but they had a section for multiplayer. I was like, that's
cool.
Impressive. I don't know if that's implying that it was supposed to originally be in this version. Maybe not. It's just probably...
I think it was
let's
a long
make
time
one
ago.
ending scroll so we don't have to update it when we put out the multiplayer.
Yeah. Does anybody have a guess on when that is hitting?
2023.
I'm going to say Q1 2022.
I'll say 2024.
2077.
There it is.
It's right in the title.
Yeah. Tim Lara's wondering if we all did go back and do anything right after finishing. He finished up the Cinderman quest since the bugged out car camera had caused me to fail the initial car chase. Anybody else go back?
Besides like doing more ending stuff, and I feel like I'm pretty satisfied with how much I've played of it. I've already played over 100 hours, so I feel okay with how many of the quests I've done. So I don't know that there's a bunch of quests that I missed. So
yeah. Case Mulder submits a comment saying, we need to talk about the very ending of the game, which regardless of your path ends with several third-person shots of your character. I think this is such a brilliant idea. It accomplishes a few things at once. It allows you to reflect on the emotions V or Johnny's going through. It's exciting. It gets you to pay attention because this has not happened in the game ever before. But most of all, it's a beautiful reflection on what the player is going through at the end of the game. Having inhabited this character first person for 50 plus hours or 100 plus, the end of the game is when your link to V is severed. This is also what happens in the game. As you go to third person, you no longer inhabit V, but you look from the outside in. I found this extremely cool, and also in line with the themes of the game. The video game itself is a means of being in someone else's mind and identified through the use of technology. Well said, Mulder.
I liked it. It made me kind of wish that they'd done it more. Like, that's not a real complaint, but it was like, oh, you can do this? I kind of wish I'd seen more of it because it's such a cool scene at the end.
It feels really weird. And then I guess that is kind of like the, well, V is their own character. They're not literally you. So now, and this is kind of the send off. But yeah, I do kind of wish those were in first person because I feel like I like that game's dedication to being entirely first person. So this felt like, well, like for the scenes that matter, we need to let the player view their own character. And I think that made the part where if you choose to be Johnny, where you're talking to V as Johnny, I think that made it stand out more. So I think it is undercut by like, well, you get to see V no matter what.
Yeah.
Also, a thing that undercuts it is again on my dumpy space casino heist run. Like that final shot right before it switches to third person, you like pick up a space helmet and you put it on, and then you pick up a gun. And when I picked up the gun, the crosshair stayed on it for the entire final scene.
Oh, no.
So V just had a crosshair like kind of on the side of her face as she was staring off into space. It's like,
oh, God.
Come on, the final cutscene, you got a bug like this in it?
Oh.
For me, it was my pensive final drive with Steve talking to him about life where there was constant car skidding sound effects for the entire 3-mile drive.
Oh God. Is it Steve or Carrie?
Steve, for me, a new character at the end.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Jake Zielsdorf has a question. Did anyone else think the leveling curve for the skills was way too steep as you got closer to 20? I completed the entire map, but I didn't get one skill to level 20, even though I had 3 attributes at level 20.
What's the max level?
I'm not sure.
I think it's 50 because the max level for street cred is 50. So I just assumed that the max level for the game is 50, and I got to 42 by the end of it. So I feel okay.
Overall level, I think he's talking about individual skill levels.
Oh,
like you level up each of those by doing whatever it is that kind of fits in that bucket. And for me, I totally understand what he's talking about, because I ended up leveling up my crafting to level 20, but the reason I was able to do it is because I had a stack of cans of some kind of soda in my thing that was bugged. And so I could disassemble them, but the cans wouldn't disappear. I wouldn't get any crafting items for them, but I could just go on it and like repeatedly say disassemble, and then when I exited out, it would give me the XP for it. What? So I basically had like an infinite XP leveling for my crafting level stuck in my inventory the entire time that I couldn't, get rid of.
Oh my God.
But like the amount that I had to break those things down just to fill it up to level 20, it must have been like tens of thousands of cans. It was absurd.
Oh, that's absurd.
Yeah, so I can understand why most people would never actually fill one of those up, especially for some of, like, I'm sure there are some of those different skill sets, like what you're actually doing to fill those up. I don't know how many times you'd have to shoot someone in the head in order to, level up your pistol or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I quick hack every enemy in the game, and I was at 16 by the end of it for quick hacking.
Yeah, other new revelations in this final section just for gameplay? Your thoughts and conclusion about, Leo, are you still... I guess we haven't just taken your temperature. How are you feeling about the game at this point?
I'm a little softer on it than I was earlier on. I feel like we've talked about our kind of confusions with the story, which I always feel weird to complain about as, I just missed some obvious things because there's so much. It's hard to grasp it all. I feel like 100%ing this game and playing another run and knowing what's going on, like, I could get a lot out of it.
Yeah.
But at this point right now, it was a fun experience for a lot of it. There were some low points, especially towards the ending. That confusion with the well left a sour taste in my mouth. But I wouldn't want to go back to it until the bugs have been fixed up, and I would know I wouldn't have those same immersion shattering bugs during these important moments of the story. So overall, I'm more tepid on it than I was at the start, but there's a lot of good stuff in it, and I'm mostly just sad that so many people worked so hard for so long on this game and it got released like this, and people rightfully all they talked about was how bad of a state it was in. It would suck to work so hard on something like that and have it basically not be talked about by anybody except the Deepest Dive on MinnMax.
A couple other podcasts have talked about it, but I feel like we've talked about it a lot in the Deepest Dive, but it's just amazing to me that outlets just treat this game as radioactive, which I understand there are problems. Hopefully we've addressed, most of them in these discussions. But I think I saw like one tweet from GameSpot where they're like, here's how to romance Judy. And I was like, yeah, this is the type of crap I was expecting to see all over the place. It just seems like no one's going near. It's fascinating.
Yeah, there was an interesting Kotaku article interviewing, or not Kotaku, I think it was Jason Schreier, so it's Bloomberg now.
Yep.
Yeah, but yeah, didn't they mention, it was somebody said like, we were planning on having it done by 2022. Was like, that's when we could have feasibly got it to the place we wanted it to be at.
Somebody, that they would expect it.
It's like, well, if this is the pace we're on, this is when the game would probably be done. And I think a lot of their concerns are waved away by like, we did this exact process for The Witcher 3 and it worked out. So hearing the ongoing kind of like mismanagement of the game and how those employees are overworked is really like that sucks for sure. But like it's weird how like that just became the conversation of like it's the bug game.
Yep.
And like that's like not unfair, but I am surprised by how quickly we just ended up moving on. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it came out in December, so quickly it was like, okay, Cyberpunk is on fire, fine, let's just move to like end of year stuff.
Right.
Yeah, I just wish we had the 2022 version of it. Like that would have changed the world. I feel like you can kind of tell where content was cut from this game, and to have all of that in a state where it was working, imagining that game coming out would have been amazing.
Yeah, Aaron T submits a comment along those lines. He says, "Hey, Max, hello. I've really enjoyed the game overall, but I've never played a game I thought warranted a director's cut more than Cyberpunk 2077. So much of this game feels like it's almost there, and that really extends to almost every part of the experience. Wouldn't it be amazing to see some of the threads and systems in the game be given that last bit of polish? I don't mean what's likely coming in the 2021 roadmap where things are fixed, but rather a chance for the writers and dev team to actually fill in the gaps or weaker parts of the story. Maybe even just through extra, more engaging text message threads or some additional content tacked onto existing quests." Yes. Yeah. If almost like they did literally treat this as it's out, but let's just say that's the early access version, and let's take care of ourselves, but let's work on this game for a couple more years and actually release the version that seems like people have been clamoring for.
I do wonder though if them releasing it now kind of meant that, like, beyond kind of like bug fixing and stuff, they just had to compromise on features that they're not going to be able to, overhaul at this point. Right? Like, I can't imagine if, for example, something like the quest design was structured so that we can't have, like, implementing a really deep choice system in the game would have broken it further. Let's not implement that. Like, that's not a thing that they can really add back in post launch. So there are some things that, like, even the 2022 version of the game will be better than a game being patched up until now in a lot of ways. But that's just speculation on my part. But
yeah, I would rather have a overhaul than whatever Witcher Blood and Wine equivalent type big DLC drop we'll probably have in the next year or two, but I don't think that's realistic.
Well, yeah, I mean, who knows what the scope is going to be, but they did have that roadmap for 2021. I believe that was in that video that they released, which everyone tore apart. But in that roadmap, it's like, all right, first half of 2021, we're going to have a couple of free DLC drops, and then back half of 2021 is when we're actually going to get the next gen version out there. And it is interesting, like, hearing the messaging from CD Projekt, and I forget the co-founder's name, I'm sorry. But in all this messaging, he's very key on, like, yes, this game is disappointing, management takes full responsibility. And he's like, but, the PC version got good reviews. Like, he always goes out of his way to be like, the PC version, critics liked it, which, yeah, I mean, for us playing the PC version, I mean, it's still unacceptably messy.
Yes.
Yeah. It's also, I think in that same video, he kind of threw QA under the bus. It's like, hey, some of the bugs weren't found. And
I didn't get that. I saw people, like, tweeting that and that being the takeaway, but I don't know. I watched that video and I guess I didn't see that in there. Maybe we need to watch it again, but am I nuts? Did you watch the video?
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like he doesn't say it in his harsher terms, but it's like talking about, like, yeah, there were a lot of bugs that we didn't find. I think always kind of like the pipeline there is immediately like, well, who would be responsible for that kind of thing? Right. And it's just like the common story you hear about QA people is that, like, they find more bugs than are addressed, right? Like the management or like someone makes a decision about, like, okay, is this a shippable bug or not?
I don't know. Maybe this is just, wading into those hot takes on Twitter, but I kept seeing that, like, now he's blaming QA, and it's like, he says that, yeah, it's buggy and that there were a lot of problems in the process and stuff, but also in that same video, he takes full responsibility. He says management takes full rescibility repeatedly. So, like, I don't know.
You can say that.
Yeah, that's not a thing that he's directly accountable for. Like, it's not like he doesn't outline, like, well, management takes full responsibility and here's what we're going to do going forward.
Yeah.
So it's hard to take much stock into that kind of statement without them, if they don't kind of take remedial steps beyond, like, well, we'll still have the game out to you eventually,
Yeah, and in that Bloomberg piece, it seems like a big theme, and this is a big theme with a lot of troubled games, is that they were just working on the engine at the same time that they were trying to design the game. Like, trying to overhaul their engine to work with what they needed this game to do was just a tech nightmare, and it's the classic Gromit from Wrong Trousers laying the track in front of the train thing.
Right. And even if, like, the idea is that they will fix it eventually, the hope is that they're not still crunching on it, right? Like, because nothing about their statement says, like, hey, we're going to try to not work our employees so hard. Yeah. So my hope is that, like, they at least take the lesson from, if nothing else, from how much of a backlash there was to that, to say, like, hey, maybe we should have people working more feasible hours.
Right.
And this is their chance to reset that. right? Like, I don't know how much they could have changed what they were doing mid Cyberpunk. I mean, obviously they could have, but how much they ever realistically would have. But now is a point where they could choose to change that after really a lot of negative crap has come out about them the last couple of years regarding that.
I mean, it should be because they've been overworking their employees, but if nothing else, if they change that policy due to how negative the reception to people finding out about that was, I think that would be a positive change for sure.
Yeah.
Do you all think CD Projekt is redeemed 6 years from now? Do you think they're going to have the comeback story? It seems pretty tailor-made for it, doesn't it?
It's tough because like not a lot of like, I can't think of a lot of single player games that have done it, because I think most of those redemption stories are like ongoing service games where even beyond the idea of like putting a game in a feasible state, like even No Man's Sky, which is like the least multiplayer of them, there's a kind of some idea that this is going to be a hangout game. So there is kind of this impetus to like fix it up over the long term. So I think most of those big ones have been for like ongoing or multiplayer games. So I'm very curious to see whether it happens, but I think CD Projekt Red has enough money, like from owning Storefront and from the success of like their past games
and this game,
kind of say like, hey, you know, six years from now, we kind of did eventually get it to a state where it worked, and like that where it was at least to some degree how we wanted it to be.
And speaking of multiplayer, I think when the multiplayer comes out, they most likely have a ton of free stuff in it as, you know, apology, because they have, you know, enough money to not really care and to spend that, you know, forego getting that extra money to build up their goodwill. I think 6 years is a realistic timeline. Yeah.
Oh my God. Can you imagine trying to run QA for the multiplayer version of this? Like, this game is a nightmare. It's a complete mess. And just, can you imagine adding multiplayer on top of that, of just trying to keep this world in line? Like,
well, yeah. And just like how that's going to work because like we talked about, like people's characters and their weapons and how much damage they're doing and everything is just all over the place. Like that Atom Smasher fight for me was a cakewalk because I had a revolver that I had leveled up so many times that I just had to shoot him like 4 or 5 times, and like that was pretty much it. And it's like how you're gonna try and balance a game that has crafting and upgrading. Maybe it's completely different. Like maybe you just pull all that stuff out, but then what the hell are we playing at that point?
Yeah, I guess the hacking and like manipulation of time is interesting too. But I mean, what have you learned from Red Dead, Leo, in terms of, is it just balance is not a big of an issue there for the online mode?
Yeah, I mean, the damage numbers don't matter too much. What really matters is like the varmint rifle being super overpowered when the game first came out, because it would like lock on headshots too fast, and it was a one-shot headshot kill. I don't know if there are lessons to really learn from that. Besides, now that I think about it, no one will ever be happy with what they make.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's true. Well, hey, Scott Heslop submitted a comment saying this is the most overhyped game of the last decade, with revelations from the Bloomberg article that the E3 2018 demo is largely faked. I will add CD Projekt Red to the list of devs I no longer trust. I know this game will be eligible for Game of the Year next year with you folks, but if it is anywhere near the top 2 10s, that means games like God of War, Horizon Forbidden West, Resident Evil Village, Halo Infinite, Ratchet and Clank either didn't come out.
Too.
What's that?
They might be bad too.
It's true. I doubt it, though. It didn't come out, or somehow all are really bad. I lost the train of thought here. He said, Witcher 3 felt special. Nothing about this game felt special and feels like so much of the game's main story was cut to get it out the door. I think, you know, some mission structure was definitely scaled back. I mean, I don't want to sound like a CD Projekt Red defender here, but also reading that Bloomberg article, which I like, and I like Jason Schreier's reporting, that's one of those things where he's like, that demo is largely fake. And it's like, yeah, all E3 demos, though, are just like a slice.
You saw it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw it. I saw it in person. Like, I think Hanson and I don't know. How did you see it in person?
Yeah, but it was
there.
I don't know which demo we're talking about.
Like the first kind of E3 demo, like the 2018 one?
Yeah, which was, I think, that first mission, wasn't it?
I think they eventually released it as a video.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that demo, yeah, like I guess I go into most demos thinking on some degree, if I look outside the bounds of this demo, I'm sure everything is broken. That's kind of my assumption going into every.
I don't know what the alternative is, that the entire world is ready and then this is just a slice of the game
now, and then you can play the whole. Yeah. But I always treat it as like, here's what we're hoping to do. So I guess I'm not like as affected by like, okay, this is nothing like it. Because even the BioShock, the demo, which is I think is the other big one of people saying like this is nothing like the final game. I also saw that one as like this is a thing that the game could be, but I think I'm kind of alone in that I don't necessarily look at a demo and think that's what I'll be playing when the game comes out.
Yeah, I think when the headline is like, oh, it's a fake demo, I take that to mean this is a CG video that they're pretending is gameplay. And I know for a fact that it was gameplay, during this demo.
Yeah,
so
that part of the game was coded in that way.
It was technically built, even if it wasn't probably existing in the open world, and the tech was obviously, completely different.
Yeah, and I'm sure if I went back and watched that demo video again, I'd be able to see like parts that, were different from it. But when I played through that mission, I thought like, oh yeah, this was the demo that I watched. Right. And it didn't stand out that much as like, maybe because it was a couple of years ago, but like that pretty much followed what I was expecting from it.
Right.
Based on that demo.
Yeah. Corey Hughes says, overall, I was quite disappointed in the game. I think what it does well, it does very well. Unfortunately, I think it does almost everything else really poorly. The strong points for me were the characters and the story. At times, I felt like I was having deep conversations with these people. Also, I think I have a bigger crush on Pan Am than I did on Tifa, which is saying a lot. That is saying a lot. Bold statement.
Wow.
I think I'm kind of with him in that, like, I think the thing to me that maybe the one statement that I think I kind of did maybe put too much stock into was them calling the city very vertical, which I don't think I feel when playing the game. It does feel like another game where you look at the map and you're like, okay, I'm just going to go to all the different waypoints. I didn't feel like I was really exploring all that much beyond when I was driving, which, to be fair, I still really like that part. I never fast traveled in that game. But it did end up feeling like, okay, this is a really well written open world game. It didn't feel as like it didn't feel like particularly groundbreaking in any area.
Yeah, I think it's not really my cup of tea, not my type of game, but I definitely enjoyed it more than I thought I would. And I understand these are unbelievably low expectations from where I was coming from. It was not hyped in any way for me personally. But playing through, I was like, you know what? Like, I wanted to explore a cool city and have some nuggets of really cool sci-fi ideas. I got that experience out of the game, and it wasn't as Deus Ex Human Revolution-y as I was worried about. And so I enjoyed my time with it, but I understand people being bummed out on 1,000 different fronts here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also like really enjoyed the city. I think I understand the criticism of it not being as vertical, but I really like the traversal in it. I do wish that they had added more stuff. Like I spent a lot of time climbing around on buildings and, seeing how high I could jump up stuff. And it's just, there usually wasn't stuff up there. And I wish if anything, like the bare minimum amount would be to hide, like more chests and stuff in hard to reach places, because I was going up there anyway. But like I appreciated how unique the city felt. I appreciated that I could go places and be like, oh, I'm back here. Like this is that, little bizarre place, or I'm, like I go back up to the little marketplace that's across all the bridges and stuff like that. Just kind of organically finding those places to begin with, and then kind of actually learning some of the layout of the city was a novel experience for me for an open world game.
Yeah, it was so fun to, God, I forget the vending machines too, but like the supposedly sentient vending machine used to be like, oh, it's right there. I've ran by that thing 30 times to go on these missions up these stairs, and it turns out there's this awesome little side quest just right there the whole time.
Aesthetically, it's a really cool city, but then like the 15th compound you break into to assassinate a guy is really not that different from the rest of them. So it's like aesthetically, I really like the city, but in terms of gameplay, it didn't feel like it really set itself apart from something like Watch Dogs or anything like that.
Yeah, the RPGness of it was very combat first, and I did wish for it a bit more in how you were interacting with people and solving missions in ways besides just gotta kill these 10 guys.
Yeah. Ryan submits a comment saying, I may be in the minority here, but I'm really into everything with the cars in this game. How different they all handle and sound, how wild and weird some of the car horns are, cop cars, that big Cadillac one in particular. The suspension reminds me of GTA 4 in the best way possible. They have weight, and you have to learn how to handle them, or else you'll be swerving all over the place. It's really great. That's a good deepest dive
I
comment.
definitely got better at the driving as time went on, but I mostly stuck to motorcycles. But when I did see a car interior, I was like, oh, okay, this is very different from the other like 10 models that I've driven.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
cool.
Aaron J. Bayer in the Backstage Pass chat, he caught my eye because he said I was right. He said, Hansen, remember that you absolutely called this months ago when you said something about there being a very real possibility that Cyberpunk 2077 would be in the 7 to 8 review range. Thank you. Turns out, see that, everybody? I called it.
By saying there's a possibility. You can call anything.
Also, yeah, Aaron points out that in that message from the co-founder of CD Projekt Red, he said that the QA testers missed that stuff. That's right. That was that messaging where it's like, they missed some of these bugs. It's not possible to have a playthrough of this game. I cannot imagine where you don't hit bugs that should be unshippable.
I wish someone had told us.
Oh, CD Projekt Red's on the line. Hello. Empiric Unicorn says, I don't think any other game has an immersive sound work for people sitting on leather furniture as deep as Cyberpunk's. It is delightful.
Yeah. I mean, like, again, like,
hell yeah.
The production values of the city, I think, are like maybe the thing they spent the most money on, because it just feels like, okay, this is a very involved version of like the open world city aesthetically.
Yeah. Carter Hansen says, I managed to upgrade to PlayStation 5 from a PlayStation 4 Pro while I was in the middle of playing Act 3. Honestly, this is a completely different video game on new hardware. I really don't mean to rub it in on anyone like Jeff playing on older consoles, but the difference in performance is staggering. Frame rate, resolution, loading times are all night and day difference, and I enjoyed the game at least twice as much after upgrading. That's so crazy that it's still the PS4 version, but just running on that PS5, it has that much of an impact. That's shocking. Yeah, Jeff, I'm just imagine.
I still want to see the massive crowds that Leo was talking about, because it's such a barren city on the Xbox One X version of it.
So crazy.
Oh, weird little tidbit that reminded me of flying to Arasaka when you were about to go into it with Rogue. The game shouldn't have still had the zoom feature, I guess, because I could right click and then scroll up and zoom all the way in on the cars in the city, and it was clearly like Cruisin' USA 2D cars sliding along the city.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I liked, for me in particular, I feel like that section really worked well, where flying into Arasaka Tower, it like perfectly mirrored the beginning of On the Corpo Path. You like take that same car as you're leaving. So it's a fun full circle there. Strange Sloth says, as an owner of a PlayStation 5 and having rolled credits on this game, I had a great time, but I can't wait for the next-gen versions, mostly because now I know how to play it. Knowing how to navigate and determine what his side story and main story will be a more liquid experience. Fixed bugs and updated visuals are a thing we all hope for, but I have fingers crossed for DualSense integration. Yeah, I bet they'll do some cool stuff with that. I don't know, brain dance scanning? I don't know, what would be the most interesting DualSense thing they could really vibrate?
The options are limitless.
Just think of them.
Your finger could feel a little resistance.
Yeah,
that's true.
When you're being hacked, the controller might rumble.
Oh, all right.
Whoa.
I'm listening. Mark Sharon says, I actually did 2 playthroughs of Cyberpunk because I was enjoying it and I wanted to see the other classes. I originally had a male character, but my second playthrough was female. It struck me how differently people refer to your character, whether you're male or female. It was most obvious with enemies who were throwing around B words and vulgarities left and right with female V, but it was also more subtle, like Dexter Deshawn greeting you with, hey, Miss V, instead of the more professional greeting he gave for the male V. I thought it was interesting. I told my wife that everyone's either flirting with me or calling me the B word, and now she said, well, welcome to being a woman. So.
Realism.
You know, that also, it made me think that final decision of whether Johnny takes over your body or you go back to it, like it made me wonder if I would have felt differently about that if I was playing as a male character, because that it felt like such an invasion and betrayal of my character, you know, the character I had been playing as so long.
Yeah.
But I wonder if I had just been playing, you know, like a random dude and I got to be replaced by Keanu Reeves, like maybe that would have been an easier pill to swallow.
Right. Even if at the end of the game you'd still feel like your male V is some random dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. God, I forget who it was that commented, but somebody commented that apparently there's a line where if Johnny takes over V's body, he makes some comment of like, well, we won't be a woman for long here. Some comment like that. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't think I ran into that.
Okay. Swiggity Swoo submits a comment asking, would you want Cyberpunk 2 or Witcher 4? Cyberpunk 2 for sure.
I mean, I would definitely want Witcher 4, but that's because I've read the books, I've played all the games, so I'm a much bigger Witcher fan than I am Cyberpunk.
Yeah. Cyberpunk 2 AD, we should point out, is what Sigris was asking.
Oh, okay. That's a very different game, but okay.
There was that line in that Bloomberg piece from Schreier where he said, like, before CD Projekt works on their next Witcher game, where it's like, was that one of those sly things where it's basically confirming that they are doing Witcher next?
I don't think it's ever been confirmed, but it does seem like, I think he does tend to do that sometimes, where he'll just be like, by the way, here's this other bit of news and I'm going to drop it.
Yes, so exactly.
That could realistically be like, hey, well, if this whole Cyberpunk thing is completely tarnished, we can always go back to more Witcher. That said, they could also do like what you said and go like Witcher or Cyberpunk 1438, and that's like Witcher 4, and that's, I don't know, and that's just a Witcher game that they just added more SEO to.
I feel like they need to repair the name for Cyberpunk and do the opposite, where it's Witcher 4 takes place in sci-fi and they just repurpose Night City. Like, here you go, everybody.
Google ranking.
Yeah, buy it again, please. I'm sure they'll work on a new version of this multiplayer, and then, God, I mean, when I visited that studio back in 2013 or whatever the hell it was, the vibe was very much Witcher 3 is the end of the Witcher series for us. So I'm curious to see if it's like,
then it became a hit on a scale nothing like what they'd done before, right?
Right. So I'm sure they went back on that and they're planning on.
I think they're on the Rockstar schedule now, flipping between their two big IPs.
Yeah, and taking forever to do it. Ugh.
Yes.
God, that's challenging.
Because I mean, they did also release they released Gwent and Thronebreaker, two games that I actually do like quite a bit. So
that's true.
If they released smaller games along the way, I think that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah. No other studio, help me out, everybody. But does any other studio like have that alternating schedule, like a Fallout and Elder Scrolls, but it changes perspective? You know, going from first to third, like that's a tough developmental transition over and over again, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think that maybe the closest one is like Insomniac is making the next Ratchet game, right? So after Spider-Man, they're doing that. So, and those are two very different controlling games. But
technically, it's the North Carolina studio, I believe, that's focusing on Ratchet, whereas Burbank's doing Spider-Man.
I think some of the Rockstar stuff also involves different studios, if I remember correctly. But yeah, like it's not as big of a shift as this would be.
Yeah, but it's a long road to hoe. It'll be fascinating to see how it unfolds. Does anybody else have something to say about Cyberpunk 2077? Say it now, forever hold thy peace.
I had one time when a bug actually made the game slightly better. Hanson, I sent you this clip. I don't know if you want to cue it up or if you can. But at one point when I was playing the concert for Johnny's thing, you get up and I remember earlier I had said that like I had a sound bug where the sound wouldn't play, right?
Yeah.
So the sound for that concert did not happen. Like he was just planking away on the guitar and it made no noise. But I did get to hear a random sound bite if you want to load it up.
So
that's the Eric Andre, yeah.
That's exactly what I found so good about it. Is that they randomly play a soundbite that plays whenever they introduce a guest on Eric Andre, the Eric Andre show. Which I don't think I would have found if they had played the regular audio for that.
That's amazing.
That's bizarre.
My last little thing, we might have talked about it briefly, but not enough. Reading shards is a catastrophic failure of game design. It's so absurd. When you get a new shard, but you don't read it right away, and then you realize, oh, I had to read that shard, and you have to scroll through 8,000 shards to find the one that's named, that's like not sorted by new or anything.
A lot of the menus are also kind of hard to read, but I think this has kind of been a thing with them where the initial menu system in The Witcher was not good, and like the skill tree stuff wasn't great either. Like it made me just not invest in that part of the game much at all, because it was just like, I don't know, like what if I mutate this, it'll happen, something will change, but it'll be like 10%, so whatever. I just stopped using skill points in The Witcher because the combat wasn't that fun anyway. But like like a lot of the menus in this game are kind of
I also wanted to point out, when I was going into the Atom Smasher, battle, I decided I was going to upgrade one of my pistols because it was a legendary pistol and I wanted it to do more damage. And so it had 4 empty mod slots in it. And so I went and I crafted some crunch mods, which add 5 points of damage to your weapon. And I thought, well, it's not that much, but 20 points might make a difference. But once you put them in, it adjusts to your level. And so each one was adding an extra 117 damage to each bullet that I was shooting. So it was like an extra 500 damage that I was adding onto every bullet. And the game just does not tell you any, like, how that entire mod system or how the, like the DPS stuff, like all of that is just so like buried and below the surface of like what you can actually understand or what you can even tell. Like I literally had no idea throughout the entire game that mods would make such a big difference. So yeah, it's a little late to be telling everyone that hot tip, but second playthrough, I guess.
Yeah. On that Adam Smasher fight, I did like kind of the Terminator aspect of him just being like so broken down by the end, and you kind of get to do the finish him move of just taking that final shot. That was a satisfying way to take out that weirdo.
I also liked on that one, on the Johnny playthrough, he's like, yeah, looks like Rogue finally killed you once and for all. And even in like his broken down, like, he like has no limbs or anything. He's like, what are you talking about? I killed that C word. And he's like, no, man, when you think about it, she killed you. It's like, what are you even talking about, Johnny?
I had that same conversation in my head. I was like, no, she didn't.
And then later, when Johnny's memorializing Rogue, he's like, it's so unfair what happened to you. After that Adam Smasher speech where he's like, Rogue got the last laugh on you. She went out the way she wanted to. It's little, maybe he was, lying.
That's
it.
You
don't remember the thing you just did.
Thank you so much for everybody that submitted a comment and played along with us for the deepest dive on Cyberpunk 2077. A round of applause for the comments. I love hearing the feedback. So glad we could take the deepest dive and give this game the discussion it deserves, going beyond a headline. Again, if you support and if you enjoyed this format, I should say, and you want to support it, you can go over to patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's. We'd appreciate any support. Submit a comment for the next deepest dive, which Serial is...
Plastics. I don't know.
Plastics.
For Mean Girls, that click.
We don't know what the next deepest dive is yet. I haven't talked to folks. I have one that's going to be a couple months away that I'm really excited about. But before that, we'll try and figure it out. We'll listen to the community. So let us know what you'd like us to do. If you want us to go back in time and do an older game, do a smaller new game, we're wide open to ideas. So jump in that community Discord and let us know what you think. But hey, thanks so much for the support and for the comments and everything like that. We appreciate it. Until next time, be good, have fun, let's go! MinnMax is a Patreon about games, friends, and getting better. The Deepest Dive is the best, most thorough discussions about games on the internet. Prove us wrong, please. The MinnMax Show podcast airs every Thursday. Patreon supporters vote on what we stream every single week, and a whole lot more. Give us a shot, try subscribing to the YouTube channel, and we hope we can win you over.